Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another quarantined edition of the Jim Cornette Experience. I'm in my home, speaking to you in your home about some other people that should be put in homes. Ladies and gentlemen, today, All Elite Wrestling has proved they can't do it twice in a row. I've had my first experience with the WWE Network, and we're going to have part two of our interview with the men behind the dark side of the ring, the new hit show on Vice TV, and so much more. And speaking of someone who's in his home and should be in a home, he's my co-host, ladies and gentlemen, formerly the owner of Last's French Toast Chateau Carry Out and Delivery, and now the proprietor of Last's Rubber Glove Factory, gloves for your hands and condoms for your masturbation sessions, because you can't even trust yourself. He is the great Brian Last.
Aloha, Jim. A pleasure to be quarantined with you once again, and for the record, actually, you're slightly wrong, but Suzanne is making face masks downstairs with her sewing machines.
What's she making them out of?
She has all sorts of materials. She has a whole business of, I don't even get involved too much, other than taking credit for it. But she has this whole, sewing business downstairs, and she's making face masks. And actually, I'm going to have her make some 605 and Arcadian Vanguard face masks so I could wear those.
Maybe we need a Cornette face mask.
We need those even when there isn't a coronavirus.
But what kind of material? Because do you just use regular old burlap or whatever's laying around the house to make these masks? Or shouldn't they be more scientifically high tech than that to prevent from disease and illness and pestilence?
No, she actually researched the proper way to make it so that it is up to medical standards. The only issue is to the people that she has gotten it to that work in hospitals, you have to have a filter to put in there. That's what we don't have. We don't have filters. We could send you and sell you the actual mask, and then you get your own filter. I don't know if you cut it out of your air conditioning vent or you actually get a mask filter. I don't know how that works.
What kind of fucking filter? Like a heating and air filter or something of that description you stick over your mouth?
I have no idea, to be honest with you.
Just don't go outside. You're the canary in the coal mine. Anyway, they said that. They said Cuomo. And by the way, can we have Cuomo as president just for the next 6 months so that we could have some hope? The most presidential guy in the room dealing with things in a proper way. But he said that New York City is the canary in the coal mine. And I thought that would just make you tweet your heart out.
Yeah.
Because you're right there next to it. Some way or another, you always manage to be right where the action is.
I have a screaming baby in the hallway. This is the problem with being quarantined and everyone's in the house.
Anyway, we shouldn't panic, ladies and gentlemen. We should just stay the fuck away from each other. And I've talked to Dr. Tom Pritchard last week and for his fine podcast. And I said, me and Tom have been practicing social distancing for years. So this is not really... Besides, sitting in the house and watching my investments dry up and evaporate and seeing all the panic and the chaos, my schedule, I think I told you this, is uninterrupted. I can't go out and run to Wendy's when I want to and get a burger, but otherwise, and I've cut down on my post office runs, although I'm cutting back up on those. But otherwise, nothing has changed for me because I'm always in my home.
I love this social distancing stuff. It's fantastic. Not having to worry about people talking to you when you go out. It's wonderful. Everywhere I go, someone always wants to talk to me. Not anymore.
Well, that is something I've noticed, that people will give you your space now. I hate those people when you go to the post office, you stand in line at the store, whatever, and there's some motherfucker. At the post office a couple of months ago, I asked Bree, my fine, healthy clerk full of vim and vigor. She's very young and very chipper. I said, is this fucking guy standing behind me about to pick my pocket? He was that close, right? And they just can't get it. So now there's plenty of space. But anyway, I'm not here to brag and crow about the fact that my life has been uninterrupted, because it has, obviously, as I mentioned. My financial health has been interrupted like everybody else's, but at least you and I, to perform our functions, we don't have to go out in the world. So we should thank the people that are actually having to go out and be around these grubby, grimy, greasy Grovers of the world that have disease and illness and take the chance to spread it around to deliver our food, and the doctors and the nurses and all that stuff. That's who, is really affected by this. And the best thing that we can do to help them is stay the fuck away from each other. And as we mentioned before, decide that you have enough toilet paper for the next fucking 3 months, and don't, buy everything that some poor senior citizen might need one of in order to, survive, for heaven's sake. Just a public service announcement from the Jim Cornette Experience. Stay away from each other. Good Lord. I mentioned I'm going to break the quarantine more next week because apparently people have been taking to heart the idea that they should watch some classic wrestling, and the DVD sets are flying out the door here at JimCornette.com, folks. Classic wrestling, 10 hours in a library case for $9, the Wrestling Gold set. All the other classic wrestling DVDs, there's under 350 of the Wrestling Golds, because they've been flying this week. That was the warehouse find, and we had thousands to start out. We do not have any more. If you want to get in on the Wrestling Gold, get in the next week or two. The action figures, there's under 200 of those left. They come from China. We may never see any more. Whether it be the books or behind the curtain, the graphic novel or something to take your mind off of this, I am shipping at JimCornette.com. And next week, instead of Monday and Friday, I'm going to Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. 2-mile round trip, no social interaction, wearing gloves, and steaming myself when I get back in the house. But I'm risking my life to make you folks happy and make your quarantine a little bit more enjoyable. Because this is going to go on for a while. You realize this. And now, so the corporations get tens of billions of dollars. People are going to get checks, some people, for either $1,200 or $2,400, depending on an individual or a married couple. I'm not going to get a check, so I don't have a dog in this fight, because what, do they cut it off at $150,000 or whatever for a married couple? But number one, will that help that much if you're fucking out of work for 6 months? Or your fucking, 401k went to a 101k? Why does a family that makes 50 grand not get more than a family that makes 100 grand? I don't understand these things. It's like, here's a check. We bungled this thing. We're trying to fix it now. We know we've got an idiot in charge, but hang with us on this, and we'll give you a fucking check for $1,200. Fuck you. Boeing gets 74 billion, but you're going to get $1,200. Am I being too cynical, Brian?
No, I don't think so.
You just don't care because we can't use this on YouTube.
Well, I'm not getting a check either.
Yeah.
I guess we do get one. There isn't a income limit on the kids, right? If you have a kid, you get $500 per kid. Is that how it works?
Yeah, you've been collecting kids there for a while now. You may come out on this.
These little tax write-offs, I love them so much.
Does Harley Quinn count, I wonder?
Yeah, I don't know.
I did use her as a dependent on my tax return the last few years. I thought that was kosher.
She does inherit the vault, maybe.
She's a beneficiary. We actually just spoke to our banker yesterday and made sure that she's going to be taken care of like Leona Helmsley's cat. Remember that? Was it a cat or was it a dog?
I was just thinking, I thought it was a dog, but
it may have been a dog. But Leona Helmsley took care of her dog, and that got her over the queen of mean. Anybody that takes care of a dog can't be all that mean.
She was a dog. Oof.
But speaking of what we can't use on YouTube, such as all these political statements they get touchy about, that's why you got to listen to the podcast here or go to the Patreon. But we have many fine clips available on the YouTube channel as official Jim Cornette that we've gained quite a number of subscribers during this time of lockdown with people wanting entertainment. Official Jim Cornette, subscribe. We're almost to 100,000. And then I think we established last week I get a cake.
First of all, we get an award. And second of all, someone brought this up. Why would you want a cake? You don't necessarily have the best history with receiving cakes.
I in the privacy of my own home, I eat many of a cake. And they never go in it's only when there's a cake and a wrestling arena that I have trouble. But in my own home, the cake goes right in my mouth, not on my face.
Have you ever, I can't believe I'm asking this. Have you ever had any incidents outside of wrestling with a cake where people go, oh, Jim has a cake there. He's kind of known for having a cake. We should do something.
No.
Okay.
No, there's never been an incident like that, and there better not be. But anyway, and with the Patreon that we have set up, and thank you for everybody who's joined, but we're putting up the original episodes of The Experience and the Drive-Thru back many years ago that most people have probably not heard. There's a bunch of them up and more going up on a weekly basis. And it's $5 a month. So for the hours alone, it's like pennies per hour for the entertainment right now. And eventually everything's going to be there. But we've got another tier coming in April and more watch-alongs. And you did some magic with the watch-along we did last week with the Lawler and Funk 5-star match and put it up on the Patreon synced up somehow. Did you not?
That's right. Obviously, everyone heard it last week on The Experience. We had the watch-along of the very first 5-star match, 1981, Memphis, Tennessee. Terry Funk, maybe the greatest wrestler of all time, versus Jerry the King Lawler. And what we did was, for patrons, there's a video right now. You can watch the match with Jim's expert commentary, available exclusively to patrons in the $5 tier right now. It is there.
Thank you for saying expert commentary.
I think it is. I don't think anyone could talk about Memphis wrestling and specifically the intricacies of something like that, the feud and the actual match and what's happening in the match, where Lawler's putting his blade, as well as you can.
Where Lawler's putting his finger, well, anyway, but yes, so thank you for joining the Patreon, and we're going to do more of that with the stuff. Some of the stuff, obviously, we can't just snatch stuff off the WWE Network and put it on the video on our channel, but some stuff that's on YouTube that's in public domain, as they say already, we're going to try to do that so that it saves you hassle. But some things we can and some we can't.
That's right.
What was that old joke? Some we can and what we can, and the rest we can't, or something like that. Canning. I can't remember that joke. The show is starting out like that already. Let's go to a different topic, ladies and gentlemen. Are you feeling tired and sluggish? Do you poop out at parties? Has your get up and go got up and went? Well, one of these days, folks, we're going to be able to go back out in public again and interact with people, and you need energy to put up with people's bullshit. And you know where you can get energy to put up with people's bullshit, Brian? Beats. More specifically, Beat Elite from Live Human. Because I thought that this was poppycock, and I was all ready to poo-poo it. But now Stacy's on this stuff every day. As a matter of fact, she snatches it away from me. I've taken it a few times, but she's got it mostly because she loves it. You've been taking it for energy. Of course, I don't work out. You exercise yourself spanking your children. But Beat Elite. You have somebody else do it? Do you have the butler do it?
That's awful. No one's spanking children anymore.
No one's spanking. What are you spanking up there?
No one's spanking children in 2020.
Is that why these fucking kids act the way they do? Because they don't get spanked anymore?
They don't even have the threat of a spanking anymore.
Oh, for God. No wonder everybody under fucking 25 is a blithering idiot. Anyway, Beat Elite works with your blood flow and your oxygen transport. And even whether you work out or whether you just go and do work, physical things, regardless, you can get energy from Beat Elite, stamina from Beat Elite. It can help pump that blood through your veins, and it's trusted by hundreds of elite teams, athletes, and organizations all over the world. So certainly the Cult of Cornette can trust it, and you can now save money and have more energy by going to Live Human, that's LIVEHUMAN, if you don't know how to spell human, livehuman.com/JCE and get 20% off your first purchase. This is exclusively to the folks here on the Jim Cornette Experience. Livehuman.com/JCE, and you will have as much energy as my lovely better half and half of Brian does. I'm not sure which half of you gets most of the energy, but regardless.
And it tastes great. I think you should add that too. It actually is really, it tastes great. I love it.
And less filling.
Boy, you getting a sponsor named Beat Elite is like, if you got a sponsor, like, our next sponsor is Fuck Russo.
Hey, if there is a company out there called Fuck Russo, I will give you extremely good rates on advertising, possibly even do it for free, just to do that spot. But yes, livehuman.com/JCE for Beat Elite. Tastes great, less filling, more energy. And like I said, we're going to have to have energy to go out and rebuild the world over the next several months. How long do you think? I've seen the doctors saying, well, by May in New York, we can have the peak of the cases, the hospital, demand out of the way, and start maybe the downhill slide, and then we go into summertime. So obviously they're realistic people, smart people, medical professionals, not Professor Pig Shit in chief, are talking about months for this.
Let's put it this way. I don't expect to send the kids back to school this semester.
Well, haven't some people already just said, fuck it, we're not going back to school in some places this year?
I don't know. We got a letter the other day from the superintendent where we are, and the letter basically said, I know we originally said that the kids are going to be out until April 6th, and actually next week is spring break. We don't expect them to be back after that, and they're not going to be back until the governor lifts I guess the governor was actually the one who declared schools are all closed throughout the state of New Jersey. And I don't expect, based on what I've seen with Phil Murphy, and based on everything I've seen with Cuomo, who has been fantastic throughout this, I hate to say he's been fantastic by doing his job competently, but I don't think the schools are going to reopen. How do you reopen them? When are you going to do that? May? And they get 1 month of school? And then, this virus is still in the air, and the kids are more likely than anyone else to be able to transmit it to someone who's a senior citizen. How are you going to do graduation ceremonies? I don't think you could reopen school.
I don't see. And kids will cough and snot and goober all over each other at any given point. So that is, and then they would all take it home. So that makes more sense than anything else, is to close all the school. Boy, we're making all the parents out there happy. I never had children. I was told at an early age that they were very expensive.
No, it's a tax write-off. You get $500 too.
Yeah, I don't know if you could write all that off your fucking taxes.
They're great.
Anyway,
they're great. You'd have a great time.
All right, we're going to talk today about. Oh, God, I wanted All Elite to do it twice in a row just so people wouldn't say, well, he just always condemns them. But they didn't. And we're also going to talk about my first foray into the WWE Network. I watched the FCW documentary, the documentary on Florida Championship Wrestling. And wow, they had some great ideas. I wish somebody had thought of them 8 years earlier. But before we get to that, last week we had our first half of our interview with Jason Eisner and Evan Husney, the producer and director and writer and creative. They're the two creative guys behind the Dark Side of the Ring, the show on Vice TV that now in its second season it was a hit in its first season. It was the highest rated original programming that Vice has ever aired. I can tell you now, after the first 2-hour season premiere debut episode on Chris Benoit, that record has been broken. They did almost 100,000 more views for the first airing of that episode as they did for the highest rated episode last season. So and we've got 9 more to go. So this thing is looking good for this year. It's Tuesday nights, 10 o'clock Eastern on Vice TV. This coming Tuesday, you're going to get to see a little bit of me, because it's the episode is entitled "The Life and Crimes of New Jack," and obviously I'm one of the people who sprung him upon the world. But I found out some shit in this episode and through filming interviews for this episode that I didn't even know that Jack had done. So anyway, they got another hit on their hands. It's going to be a great season. Before we get started talking about the other types of wrestling that I have watched this week, let's go back to part 2 of our interview with Jason and Evan that we conducted last week about the rest of the episodes of Dark Side of the Ring. You do a great job on the really serious stories, and you do a great job also on the stories that are just that came from bullshit and have serious undercurrents to them. I mean, tell the folks, I've teased them with some of them, but what are the rest of the topics? Do you want to reveal everything?
Yeah, no, we've announced all the episodes, so we can say a few things about each of them if you'd like. Jason, you want to just go for it? Start with one.
Well, what do we got first? We got the New Jack episode.
Oh yeah.
Okay. And I've seen that one. I've seen that one, and oh my God, I found out things about New Jack I didn't know.
What did you think about the New Jack episode? Let's ask Jim what he thought of it, because he hasn't told me really. I guess he said you liked it. But.
You know, once again, it tells the story as best you can in an hour. I mean, of a complex individual, but you definitely hit all the high spots, as they say. And I said at one point, I feel like, Dr. Loomis, Donald Pleasant's character in Halloween. I'm the one who kind of let him loose on the world. And my God, I didn't even know about a couple of the assault arrests from things that happened in the ring. They flew under the radar, but it also it tells you this was a guy who was unique and who probably could only rise to prominence in a crazy world like professional wrestling. But he's not just a fucking lunatic. He's a lunatic. He has a reason for being a lunatic. You go into his childhood and things that, happened to him that probably shaped some of his outlook on things. And you see his progression thanks to the B-roll and the stuff that you're able to use, his progression from a young guy in his 20s getting into wrestling and having an incredible promo and just being, willing to be that guy. And 20 years later, there's scars and there's injuries, and he is no longer has to be that guy. He has become that guy. And it's heavy. D'Lo Brown is in the episode, and he knows this better than anybody. He was there at the start and in ECW and a variety of places. And it's New Jack. What did you go through just to get New Jack to sit down?
Actually, it was very easy. It was a phone call that I can't remember who gave me his number. Someone gave me his number, and I called him, and I was like, "Hi, Mr. New Jack." No, and I was like, "Yeah, we do this TV show, and we want to do an episode about you." And he's like, "Yeah." I was like, "So is that okay?" And he's like, "Yeah." I was like, "Okay, so then I'll call you back with a date." Yeah, and that was it. It was 3 years. And then we went to, we came all the way out to where he lives, and then, was just like hoping that those 3 years would equal him showing up. And it did. And we actually shot, his interview on in an old movie theater, right in front of these, you can kind of see all these balconies of theater seats, because we thought that would be kind of appropriate. And I don't think he really knew or understood that, this was a TV program, and not a shoot interview or something. But he was, as I'm sure any wrestling fan who's seen a New Jack interview, he was on, and he was very on and very good. And, it was one of the more memorable interviews we did, right, Jason?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Usually our schedule is so crazy that it's really hard to find time to just spend time with our subjects and just earn their trust and just get to know them before we talk. And, we try our best to do that. But with New Jack, it was literally, he just walked in, and there was no small talk, and it was just roll the camera and let's go.
Zero small talk. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Jack and I, everybody knows, have had our checkered past, and then we made up years ago. But that's when I first saw him, and I say this in the episode, paraphrasing. to me, wrestling has always been about, can you make me believe that you are the person you are purported to be? And he had that from the start. And his work was questionable at the start, and nobody's ever worked like New Jack, even when he got experience. It's always been unique, but it didn't matter. He gave off the aura, both verbally and physically in the ring. And poor Riggy Morton, had to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune with New Jack and Mustafa, as green as grass, beating the shit out of him night after night. But Jack always was a personality that you could believe in him because he believed in him. And one of the morals of the episode may be that he believed in him so much that he became him. And I've always said there's never should be any discernible difference between a guy's gimmick and a guy in real life. Just turn the volume up. I bet New Jack had to turn it down.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah. And I would just also say, like, our show deals with so many, common themes across the other episodes of, like, here's what happens when, reality and the fiction aspects of wrestling, when those collide, and what happens. And like New Jack looks at some pretty harsh consequences in terms of, like, where do you draw the line between, okay, we're wrestling, we're working, and now it's crossing the line into something more nefarious.
Felonious assault, I believe, was the phrase that I used. We're crossing the line between working and felonious assault.
Yeah, it was funny. And but also it's just, and that was kind of what we wanted to look at. And but one of the eye-opening things for me in that episode was I had never really seen much of New Jack and Smoky Mountain before doing this. And it was just like, wow, like what a cutting edge character for that time, in terms of, like, such a reflection of, like, what's going on in the world at the time, playing off the fears of the audience, and it just being this kind of, like, there is some genius in that, and that was what was really interesting for me. I don't know, and putting the story together. I don't know, Jason, but for you.
No, absolutely.
Sure.
It's like when you see that footage, that Smoky Mountain footage, there's an energy to it that I haven't really quite seen in any other, like, wrestling footage. Like the heat that he gets, like when people are just, like, throwing the Confederate flag, like, in his face and screaming at him. And, but that at the same time, like D'Lo Brown talks about it in a very complicated way, is that, like, he's looking to try and get this reaction from a crowd, or even if they're, like, hurling racial slurs at him, that's kind of what he's looking for in a way, which it's very complicated, but you got to hear it from D'Lo himself in our show. But it's just, like, such an interesting way to take entertainment in,
Well, that's the one time I tried to be newsworthy. Everybody always says I'm stuck in the past, so I've tried to book up-to-date angles, and then I've forever been branded as a monster for, how dare you, the gangsters. But it was a guy that was brand new, that had never been seen on television before, that had never been seen by the mainstream, widespread wrestling audience before. But he comes in as a promo, not only fully formed, but exceptional, and with a look that backs up the way that he works, because he didn't really do anything that he couldn't do. He just fought. He was not a wrestler. He fought, and it came off, and it was probably, I would say, 5 to 7 years before its time.
I agree. Yeah, totally.
But what some of the other episodes, what have been your guys' favorite moments or stuff we need to look out for? Because there's a whole slew of them in between.
Okay, what do we got? Well, we got we finished 2 episodes that we started work on last season, which I'm very thankful that are going to be finally coming out. So that's the Brawl for All, featuring yourself.
And many others, and not just me. I know I'm the draw, guys. I know I'm the main event.
It's just you. No, we cut everybody else out. It's just you, and it's great. No,
I want one other motherfucker on that specifically. I haven't seen this one yet either, but I want to hear what he has to say for himself.
I can't wait. I can't wait for you to see it. I'm very excited for you to see it. But basically, yeah, like Brawl for All, was an episode that it's funny because since announcing the lineup of this season, I'm getting a lot of messages, a lot of people messaging me and saying, why the Brawl for All? Or how'd you get an hour out of the Brawl for All? or whatever. Or how is the Brawl for All dark? And I'm thinking, guys, the Brawl for All is really dark, like it is, because, you have these guys, like I was going back and saying, just like the risks people take for this industry, right? And especially in an instance like the Brawl for All where, you're trying to get ahead. Like a lot of these wrestlers that went into it were looking for a chance to improve their spot in the card, and when you see guys taking that risk and throwing themselves into a situation in which they're not suited for, or is beyond their element, and the consequences of that, like for the sake of, I guess at the time, which was like, Attitude Era entertainment, it is kind of like from a macro view, you kind of look at it in that way, and it is disturbing. It's disturbing to watch, if you go back and look at it. I remember when when we were all at your house and we watched it together, so, yeah. And I think, for that, it definitely
it was disturbing to watch it was disturbing to watch for the fans and the professionals, but it was darker for the professionals than it was for the fans. And that's where the darkness comes in is so many of those guys, it spread ill will, it spread injury, it harmed careers. It basically, it was one of those rare lose scenarios where nobody prospered.
Yeah, it's like the wrestling version of the Running Man, kind of.
Arnold made out okay in that.
Yeah, I guess so.
And then also,
well, yeah, and then you look at, one more thing about it. Why it's also a fascinating story. You look at a guy like Bart Gunn who wins it. He wins it, and he's thinking like, okay, like here's my time. Like I just knocked out the whole roster, and now here's my time. To really be celebrated. And then it's like, nope, you're just going to get decapitated by this guy that's just going to come in and just punch your face off. And then it's like the most like deflating, cinematic, kind of, but like tragic ending to this like crazy calamity story,
Well, that's true, because in the lose scenario, let's not leave well enough alone. And let's destroy anything that we've built from a guy that's never coming back to our company, Butterball, or Butterbean, Butterball. Oh, my God. Another show that was left over from last season. And boy, it's amazing how you get more episodes when you're just the highest rated television program in the history of a network. But another one was about Dino Bravo, and a lot of the modern fans may not even be familiar with this story at all, but this is an actual wrestling-related gangland slaying.
Yeah. I mean, the Dino Bravo story was, it's fascinating because it's, for those who don't know, Dino Bravo was, I'm sure most of your listeners know who Dino Bravo is, but, being a huge star, in Montreal in the late 70s, early 80s. And then he kind of, when he got poached by the WWF, he kind of just didn't really make much of an impact in the States, in terms of, he was getting towards the end of his career. And then when he moved on from wrestling, he didn't really have a way to supplement his income. And he had no plan for his post-wrestling life. And he basically got involved in, illicit, illegal, activities in organized crime. And then he was, he was killed in his living room, and when his family was away, and it was just it came into this huge story locally in Quebec, and no answers, no closure, no answers, no real evidence even to what happened. Only some kind of rumors and hearsay and some corroborated stories in terms of what he was involved in, but no conclusive end to who's responsible. And interestingly enough, the case happened almost 30 years ago now, 27 years ago, is still open. It's a still open case. So it's, for us, it's like, we couldn't get any cooperation with the local authorities because of that fact. And so we basically were relying on most of, the people that knew him close and intimately, his family, his daughter, his wife, and some of the other wrestlers who, came up with him in Montreal, and just trying to piece together, where things went south, and also what was going on in Montreal at the time, because organized crime was a hotbed of organized crime at that time as well.
I think it's safe to say that nobody came in 6 years after he retired and killed him because they were hot at him for a fuck finish. It had to be what he was currently involved in at the time. And then another episode.
It was only a year later. It was only like a year. And
that's right. Because he didn't retire until about a year or so
92.
before that. Yeah. Well, so maybe the heat could have still been fresh. But another of the episodes is on the Road Warriors. And I've seen some of the reenactment footage, which you guys have been dying to do.
Oh yeah, we posted some stuff, yeah.
And this is another example of, and obviously Animal is still with us, but Hawk's story was kind of tragic in its own right. And after having spent so much time with those guys, they were over so strong for such a short period of time. Then, unfortunately, with the changes in WCW where they fit like a glove, they went to the WWF. I don't think were ever presented to their full ability. They were never the dominant force that they were for those first 5 years as the Road Warriors or whatever. And then after that, they were so strong. The legacy is still there. But, Hawk's story, obviously, I haven't seen a screener on this one either, but Hawk's story, makes that thing go around after their, active days as a team were over with. And that had to be fun doing the reenactment, but, getting into, Hawk's issues and vices and et cetera. And what a great guy he was. But, that was another one I'm going to be looking forward to.
Doing the interviews for the Road Warrior episode, speaking with people who were really close to Hawk, we never quite seen such a reaction in a way that, like, so many of our subjects were very emotional talking about Hawk. Like, all the guys we talked about started crying when he was, like, brought up. Even something that, like, his brother said that was really powerful was that he never saw his brother as Hawk. He only saw him as Mike. And when you hear, like, how he, like, touched so many people, it's pretty amazing, because we've only really seen just the character of Hawk, where he's just super energetic and, like, crazy over the top, and to hear from people about, like, just how, like, kind he was and affectionate he was to his friends, that was a side we never I wasn't really quite expecting to see.
Yeah, it's really like a story of like, brotherhood, and, like, your brothers on the road, and then what, especially for Animal, for Joe, like, the experience of a fallen brother, and that whole thing, and obviously gets into, Hawk's demons and those types of things, but it also just explores so much of that, like, relationship and that companionship that you have, and especially with all these guys coming from the same place. And or most of them coming kind of from the same area. And I have to throw this in, is like, it's also kind of a hometown episode for me, because I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota. And a lot of the places these guys, went around and bounced at and, bartended at and worked out at are places I definitely, seen growing up. And so for me, it was kind of just like going back to Minnesota. And we actually decided to shoot the entire episode in Minnesota. The whole thing is shot in Minnesota. It's the only episode we've ever done where it's in one place, because we brought everybody to Minnesota to kind of, like, and then, to kind of just reconnect and, talking to, like, obviously Joe's in it. You have Nikita's in it. Scott Norton's in it. Paul Ellering's obviously in it. And Hawk's brothers are in it. And then also like Eddie Sharkey's in it, which is awesome to be able to talk to him.
Cool.
Is he still blind as a bat without his glasses, Eddie Sharkey?
I would assume, but he's a cool dude. I mean, I couldn't believe this. We were in his apartment, and I don't know, like the subject of like Ribera jackets came up, and I was like, oh, like talking about how like someday I hope to go to Tokyo and check it out, be the ultimate wrestling fan. And he's like, oh, I think I got one of those jackets over here. And then he gave me his Ribera jacket.
Oh my
just
God.
like out of nowhere. Just like, here you go. And I'm like, are you sure? Like, I can't accept this. And he's like, no, I want you to have it. And he just like gave me this like amazing 1980s, I'm guessing, like Ribera jacket, which I treasure now and will keep safe for the rest of my life. But the one thing I wanted to say, and Jason, you should talk about this, is the Road Warriors. This is also a huge kind of, this is like us, like, Road Warriors are a big deal to us, in terms of like kids growing up and like how cool they were, And so for us, it's like the opportunity to kind of live out that fantasy a little bit, So you should talk about that, right? I mean,
oh no, big time. Like I think ever since we like came up with the concept of Dark Side of the Ring, we always thought like in our trailer there would be like an image of a backlit hawk and animal with their spikes on, and it's just you just see the streams of light going through it. So we fantasize about that like ever since we came up with the concept. And so yeah, in a lot of ways for us growing up, they were like real life action figures. It's kind of crazy to say, but just their design and the aesthetic of them were just the most amazing looking like action figures. And then now like to really like, it's like in some way it's almost kind of like getting to know the person behind my favorite action figure. And and like Joe, like Animal's like identity is kind of is largely like, the Road Warriors are a part of his like identity. And with Hawk being gone and you're losing your companion with that, it's like, how do you
maintain
still move on? Yeah. Like, how do you move on with with that identity? And like, it's that's like that was the real heart of it all, I think.
Well, I was also just going to throw on top of that too, just like backing up to, us being fans of the Road Warriors. I really challenge anybody like to show me something cooler than the Road Warriors at their peak entering a goddamn arena with Black Sabbath playing. There's nothing cooler than that. There's nothing
I can tell you
tougher and cooler than that.
I can tell you from firsthand recollection, not only was the pop was, as Mick Foley said one time, was Hegstrandish in its intensity and Laurinaitis-like in its volume.
Wow.
But
amazing.
also, he's incredible. But just the sight, we would get goosebumps. And the Midnight Express had to work with the Road Warriors in not only their real hometown of Minneapolis, Minnesota, but their gimmick hometown of Chicago, Illinois. Yeah. And it wasn't like they were pricks. I've said many times how the Warriors always sold for the Midnight. They knew we were going to do everything we could to make them look like $1 million and get the gimmick over. And they didn't mind selling for the racket because they knew it was loaded, all that stuff. They were great to work with in that aspect. But in the early years when they were still very excited and you would hear that rush, they would come to the ring, and Dennis, especially because Dennis was the first, a member of the first combination of the Midnight that had to face him. Dennis would look at us and say, "We're about to get our fucking asses kicked." Because we believed it, because they believed it, and they did it in a working way. But my God, it was an atmosphere that you can't find anymore because it was superheroes coming into the building.
No, that's just I don't think that'll be ever, that feeling of like that will be replicated, just of like, especially when you look at it in Japan too, just like how close the audience is to the action. And like when those guys hit, and they come out in the C's part, kind of like Brody. But when you just mix that, with Brody was the Immigrant Song, which is so cool, and then with, obviously the Road Warriors is Black Sabbath. It's just the best mixture of like, just this intense, insane visual out of a movie, out of like, just way comic book, like way farther out. So we also just wanted this episode yes, it deals with like tragic themes that our show explores, but it's also just like a love letter and like a puff piece on like the Road Warriors because they're so cool, you know?
Yeah. Well, hey,
Yeah.
I know one love letter you're sending that Brian Last is going to enjoy, because there is an entire episode for the first time that I know of, again, ever in mainstream television, on the lifetimes and bizarre end of Herb Abrams, the most infamous wrestling promoter of modern times, maybe second only to Jack Pfeffer in wild stories being told. How did you run down the people that knew what the fuck was up with Herb Abrams?
I got to tell you the origin story on Herb Abrams, because it's definitely funny. So you know Sean Oliver, obviously.
Yes.
Right? So
yes.
Sean Oliver does kayfabe commentaries. Basically, what happened is when we first started thinking about Dark Side of the Ring as an idea, a concept, whatever, and trying to put together stories that would fit with the show, I actually asked him, because like I said, you know, Jason and I were really into shoot interviews, and we wanted to make Dark Side of the Ring basically just glorified cinematic shoot interviews. We asked Sean, like, what do you think? What are some of the craziest wrestling stories that are out there? And the key, like the keystone, you know, like he made it so clear. It's like, you have to look into the Herb Abrams story. This is what you need to look into. This is Vice. This is everything. Like, look into this story. And like, it kind of went in one ear and out the other a little bit, I'll admit. And I put it down on paper. It was actually part of the original pitch materials that we used to pitch the show. It was in there originally. And for whatever reason, it just didn't stick for season one. And then a few months ago, I talked to Sean. He interviewed me on his podcast, and he basically grilled me and was like, why didn't you do this story? I told you specifically to do this story. The world doesn't need a Montreal Screwjob documentary. They need the Herb Abrams documentary, you know? And it was like, okay, I'm sorry. And I actually turned around and went to the office the next day, and I told the staff, guys, it's Herb Abrams time. And then we have one of our colleagues here. He's a story producer here, and his name is Howard. And he basically took the story and ran with it, and in an amazing way. Like, he's like almost now become Herb Abrams in some ways.
Hopefully he won't go out the same way.
No. Well, he might like that. But he basically tracked down all of the people that, you know, were part of the formation of UWF, family members, and piecing together the story. Because the only thing that I knew going into this story, I guess we should fill people in who might not know what this is about. But, you know, Herb Abrams was basically a wrestling fan with a dream. And his dream was to start his own wrestling promotion called the UWF. And that he would run himself, he'd be the centerpiece of, and he would basically get ex-WWF talent at the time, and this is late 80s, early 90s, and go head-to-head with Vince. I mean, that was what his dream was, you know? So, and then,
wait a minute, you said this was the late 80s. I thought you were talking about this was this year, but go ahead.
Oh, no, it was. No, and so then he, exactly, that's pretty funny. And then, it failed spectacularly. And then he met his end, of course. And it's this incredible story, untold story, I think, in any sort of way. And the information that Howard was able to get and uncover, and everything that we were able to get from the people who lived through it, including Mick Foley, you know, who really cut his teeth there. It's going to be definitely an episode you can't miss this one. You know,
I don't want any spoilers, but just answer the one question: how many naked hookers were in Herb Abrams' office when he had the heart attack while on cocaine and covered in Vaseline?
Well, I don't know the answer to that question, unfortunately, but I can say that it is that moment in time is like, it's like the JFK assassination of wrestling. Like, we can't find out like what has happened definitively in that moment. We have talked to so many different people, and there's literally like 12 different takes on what had transpired that night in that office. And we kind of Rashomon style kind of show you all of them.
We need
Yeah.
the Zapruder film is what we need.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah.
And a couple more episodes real quick. You're doing Dr. D, David Schultz, and the episode with John Stossel on 2020 and the surrounding furor and uproar, which once again, a lot of people know, but this is coming straight from all the horses' mouths. And also another story that I just can't wait to see what you do with this, because you've done such an incredible job with everything else. But another story people think they know, Superfly Jimmy Snuka.
Yep. Those are, two interesting stories. I mean, we can start with Dr. D. I mean, Jason, that was one of the more, memorable experiences for us, definitely on the road.
Yeah. Meeting Dr. D was amazing. It was so cool to spend time with somebody who is from that era, like a guy who was good friends with Bruiser Brody, and spent time with him on the road, and just to get somebody I don't know, it just meeting him was one of the best experiences for me, at least, because I don't know, he was just really considerate in a lot of ways. Like I was saying before, you don't have a lot of time to spend with people, and we at least had 2 days with David. But right off the bat, he just wanted to know things about us, which actually was kind of interesting. Usually when we land on a scene, it's just we're just talking about wrestling with most people for the most part. But with David, it was I don't know, he wanted to get to know us in in a different way. Probably he wanted to see if he could trust us. And we spent time with him out in Tennessee, where he has these storage lockers that were just filled with incredible wrestling memorabilia and photographs from his past. And it was a real trip just to spend a couple days with him. And he was him being so considerate. We all, the crew at that point, when we got there, we were, I think, so malnourished and sore from camera operating, that him and his wife, they made us lunch. They went out and they picked fruit and vegetables from their yard to give us. And David literally massaged me, stretched me out.
He reset you.
Yeah, he did. He reset me. Yeah. I got treatment from the doctor.
Well, David is one of those guys. His personality is so intimidating, and his demeanor is so intimidating. But he's one of those guys. If he's on your side, if he likes you, you couldn't count on a better guy. If he doesn't like you, you probably should stay away from him.
Yeah. Well, I think he may have taken to us. I'm from Nova Scotia, Halifax, Nova Scotia, and he spent.
We won't hold that against you. We will not blame you for that.
But he spent a lot of time in Nova Scotia wrestling in Atlantic Grand Prix with the likes of Killer Carl Krause, and I don't know, he as soon as he heard that we were I was from there. I don't know.
Yeah, that was legit.
It took an edge off.
Did he tell you the story of the night that he saved Phil Hickerson and Dennis Condrey's life when the cops and the people turned on him, and he brought the hockey stick like a helicopter blade to the ring and back out of there?
Oh yeah,
it was like, in Texas they say one riot, one ranger. With Schultz around, it's one riot, one doctor.
That's amazing. No, and I have to also just quickly say about Dr. D is that the experience of filming with him was very it was not the same emotionally, but it kind of felt like being in Kevin Von Erich's compound, being in the Von Erich compound, in Hawaii, which is this beautiful, amazing, place, serene, and then Dr. D's is in literally the middle of nowhere, rural Tennessee, where no cell phones work. We had to get snake bite kits. This is where we were, and it was literally going into this compound that he built with his own hands. And it's just amazing to see someone at his age who is literally working 14 hours in the sun and over the course of the night, and he's nocturnal, and he's it's amazing.
Do you think the coronavirus is even has the news even reached David yet? He's self-sufficient. He don't have to leave there for years, right?
Oh, I bet it's not a worry. Out of the coronavirus. Yeah. No, I don't think it's a worry for him. He actually messaged me just a few minutes ago saying he was on his way to Nashville to help people. That's what he just texted me.
Well, there you go.
So, David's, that's David, for sure. That episode is really interesting too, because, wrestling fans will get to hear from John Stossel, for the first time. And, that'll be interesting. And that was a very fun interview, I have to say, as one of my more favorites, just because I was so curious on how the interviews between David and John Stossel would intercut, it's very entertaining. I will say that for you.
John, you ignorant slut.
Yeah.
We talked in advance of you guys shooting a lot of stuff for the Snuka episode, and one problem you had there was it's incredible when you go back and look at the amount of people who were in the locker room at that time, in the WWF at that time, around the incident that aren't here anymore. It was down to a precious few already.
Yeah, it was really tough for us to find and to speak to wrestlers who, but we wound up doing it, but who were there that night during those events.
You got pretty much everybody that's left to get.
Probably. But that story is it's an episode as we speak right now that we're still working on. I mean, we're still working on the show, folks.
Yeah. I'm cutting that episode right now.
Yeah, he's in the, I know. So we're still rushing to finish it for air. But I mean, it is one of the more complex, dizzying stories out of all of the ones that we're tackling this season, because, so much of it was unresolved at the time in which it took place. And then of course you're looking at how when the story, came back into, when it came back into the headline in 2013 or whenever it was, or 2015, and having to sort through, all this new information and going back in time and seeing how this has lingered on and how we're kind of dependent on a lot of people's memories 30 plus years later. It is a very complicated story to tell, in terms of, what really happened, and maybe we'll never know. It might be one of those situations where it's just, now that Snook has passed on and, the story has kind of faded away, it's really, maybe we'll never know, but, there are a lot of interesting facets of the story that are left to be examined,
Well, guys, is there anything else that we haven't covered that you want to let people know to look for, or just look for everything on the second season of Dark Side of the Ring?
Yeah, I mean, we start March 24th, as you said before, with the 2-hour premiere on the Chris Benoit episode. It starts at 9 p.m. And then every Tuesday from then on, the show will be running at 10 p.m. on Tuesdays. You can find us on, social media at Dark Side of the Ring on Instagram or Dark Side of Ring on Twitter, and, ask us any questions, send us stuff. Especially, we're not really up on too many conspiracy theories, but obviously if there's some of the stories we're covering this season, if there's any tips or leads on anything that we missed or we didn't get, definitely send us stuff, and we'd love to chat about them with you. And I'm sure we're going to be, doing some things on Twitter and on Instagram to kind of, address that stuff and talk to you guys about that stuff. But yeah, definitely want to hear feedback about anything. And I don't know, Jason, anything else that you want to?
No, I think you covered it all. Like we're still here working on the shows. We still have like another month of editing we've got to do here.
Quarantined in the edit room.
We are. We literally are. So yeah, I just hope this all goes smoothly and we get all these episodes out to everyone.
Yeah, we're
trying. Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you, I said it last year that I thought it was not one of the best wrestling shows or series I've seen, but one of the best series about wrestling, because, this isn't no low budget, half-ass production. And I think this season, from what I've seen, you guys have exceeded last year's expectations. If you're a wrestling fan and you're not watching this, I don't know what's the matter with you. And if you don't like wrestling and you just come here to hear me rant about politics and me and Brian argue about pizza, you still want to see this show because you humanize everything and you make it so the stories are about wrestling, but they're not exclusive to wrestling. They're human stories and they touch humans. And I think you've done a great job. I know I'm raving. I'm blowing you right here in public. But when I like something, I spread it around. And it's not just because I'm in some of them. Because I've actually liked the ones that I wasn't in more than the ones that I was in because I learned more about that stuff. But I want to thank you guys for being here. And when this is the biggest hit ever, exceeding last year, like you said, we want to encourage everybody to come up with ideas for season 3, but we may have to have you back on. Just remember us. Remember the little guys when you're out there at the Academy Awards next year. Anyway.
Well, Jim, we got to thank you too. Like whenever we come to your place, you and your family, Stacey and Harley Quinn, have always been so gracious to us, and you've treated us so well, and you've been so inspiring to us as well too, and given us guidance and helped us along the way. Yeah. We can't thank you enough.
Yeah, you missed the tacos last time.
Jason, you couldn't come last time. They just come for the barbecue, ladies and gentlemen. And we actually...
Hey, it's a big part of it.
They have great tacos at the barbecue place, Martin's Barbecue here in Louisville, and the smoked wing, everybody, and the hush puppies with comeback sauce.
The best.
There you go. Yeah. Anyway, all righty.
Well, there you hear it, Jim. Part 2 of your conversation with the producers of Dark Side of the Ring. And of course, like you said before, this coming week, you're on the show, The Life and Crimes of New Jack. Someone who I always found, I believe it or not, I always found him to be a very pleasant guy. I always liked New Jack.
Well, and you go with some of the clips that they use, you go from seeing him in Smoky Mountain Wrestling where he was a fresher-faced young man with no scars, and then now you see it, his head looks like fucking – it doesn't look like Abdullah's because the creases aren't that deep, but you can definitely tell that he's been through a few more matches than he was back in the 90s. Anyway, that's going to come up this Tuesday, and then they've done – Dino Bravo and the Road Warriors and the Brawl for All, and Owen Hart is going to be a landmark episode with the first time we're really hearing on a mainstream basis from Martha. That's going to be a great show. Anyway, Tuesday nights, 10 o'clock Eastern on Vice TV. And before we go into our reviews, so to speak, what are you doing? Have you added more shows this week? Now you're doing 24 shows this week?
Actually, there are a few extra shows this week on the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network. Get information about all shows on Twitter at Superpodcasts or on Facebook, facebook.com/Arcadian Vanguard. On that topic, the Mid-Atlantic Championship Podcast with Mike Sempervive and Roman Gomez. We have already dropped 3 episodes this week reviewing classic Mid-Atlantic wrestling from 1982. Episodes you can watch on the WWE Network, Jim. And then also hear this expert commentary about what was really going on, as well as some audio bites. And I believe they're just about to release a special on Clash of the Champions 1 from 1988. Get more information and check it out. It's a great show. MidAtlanticPod.com, available wherever you find your favorite podcast. Want to make mention, we talked about it last week, Breaking Kayfabe with Bowdrin and Barry. Jeff Bowdrin has just left the hospital. The first episode since he was hospitalized is up right now. Hear about his first round of chemotherapy, how he's doing, as well as a conversation with Bill Alfonso that's quite memorable. Which WWE superstar was Bill Alfonso a fluffer for? Find out more at BowdrinPod.com. It was a giant wrestler, available wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Don't forget the 605 Superpodcast, the Mothership!
Oh, God damn it, you caught me unawares on that one.
I know I did. You didn't have any sound effects ready to go.
I just jumped right in. I saw you pick up the speed, and I was like, oh, he's going to do it, and then he did it.
Episode 102 in production. Hopefully it'll be out within a week. We're working on a couple extra things for it. Episode 103 is in production as well. But go through the archive today. Hundreds, if not thousands of hours of classic wrestling talk. 605pod.com. Available wherever you find your favorite podcast. Also on Facebook, facebook.com/ Superpodcast, the mothership.
Yeah, mother. All right, and you better get some more stuff up on the Patreon too, because as I mentioned, we're going to be here a while. But thankfully, how many have we ever added up? How many thousands of hours that we're going to have up on that thing when we put all of these programs up, all the experiences, all the drive-throughs, a couple different incarnations of the drive-throughs in various formats? How that's got to be like to fill the Library of Congress. Because I feel like I've been talking nonstop for the last 8 years. Yeah, for some reason, the show becomes longer the more you're involved in it. That's Jim Hurd said that to me one time. He said, Cornette said there's more talking on the show. When I got on the creative team, he said, I knew with you around there'd be more talking. I said, but that's because with me around, people got more to say. He never got a fucking idea. Speaking of no ideas.
But he knew his pizza.
I don't know that he ever even knew anything about pizza. I'm sure he probably never cooked any. He was an executive at Pizza Hut. He probably never went to any of the stores. He's just an executive that just hung around and fucked shit up. He is still alive in St. Louis somewhere. Still. Maybe the coronavirus breakout in St. Louis,
Don't say it.
Well, the elderly or whatever. What's he got to be, 97 by now? He looked so ancient back then.
How old was he, actually? In WCW, how old was he when you were there?
I've had people tell me that he wasn't as old as he looked, that he was only maybe in his mid-50s. But he's got to be 80-something now. Still around. And now to see all of this, when you think about it, every single bit of this can be traced back to Jim Hurd. It's all his fault. Modern wrestling is Jim Hurd's fault. If Vince McMahon hadn't had those 7 years unopposed to change the face of the business into whatever he wanted it and make all the silliness start happening, and WCW was completely impotent because of the way that Hurd kicked it off, the NWA style of wrestling may have won that fucking fight. We'll never know. So next time you see the Invisible Man, thank Jim Hurd. Anyway, I've saw a bunch of invisible fans on All Elite Wrestling Dynamite. Okay, what the fuck? Last week was so good. The star of the show was MJF, so this week he wasn't on it at all. Not even on tape that I saw. I was skipping through some of these tape packages because I'd seen the shit before. If he couldn't get out of New York, then that's an acceptable excuse. Otherwise, the only guy that really made last week's show, and you don't have him on at all. Secondly, none of the boys in the building, after what they were universally praised for was having 8 or 10 of the guys sprinkled out in the crowd to fucking cheer or boo or knock or have interaction or whatever to keep things a little bit more lively. And this week they don't do that at all. Why?
I don't know what the laws are in Florida about how many people you're allowed to have congregate in one area right now.
Okay, in one area. And by the way, as far as I know, the supermarkets are still open everywhere. Your grocery stores, right? Okay, they were in an arena that's the size of a fucking Kroger. They didn't have to have 8 guys in the seats sitting all together. They could have 2 guys in this 50 square foot area and 2 guys in this 50 square foot area. It's a fucking arena. It doesn't make any sense to say that you can't have 10 people congregated together when the 10 people in an arena would have more space in between them than 100 people would in a fucking grocery store. Right?
You would think maybe. I'm trying to look up and see what because some places are 50 people, some places are 25 people.
Well, and besides that, are you banned from having them in you? Because this is their building, right? This is the place they own in Florida. The Khan family owns this place.
I believe so, yes.
Okay, well, if you wanted to have 17 people in your fucking home and you were pretty sure that they were all healthy, you could still do that, right?
I guess technically. I'm looking. I'm trying to find out.
I'm speaking the sense to you. I'm speaking the sense to you. speaking the sense to you. If you want to have 17 people in your fucking home and you think they're healthy and it's not endangering the public because they're all in your fucking group, then you ought to be able to do that. Well, they own the fucking building. Everybody seems to be healthy. No members of the public are allowed. The only people that are going there are professionals that are being paid to be there and do it at their own risk. So they can all be in the building, but you can't sit 2 in the north section of ringside, 2 in the east section, 2 in the west section, 2 in the south, whatever the fuck, to make a little noise. It does not make sense. Anyway, Tony Schiavone is in the risk group, but apparently he'll go anywhere. Tony's fearless. JR did not go, and I've wondered why that JR would have been traveling over the last couple weeks, because he's definitely in the risk group age-wise. Excalibur, the only risk group he's in is in the Columbia School of Broadcasting, using him as a bad example. He's at the risk of that every time he opens his fucking mouth, but he's supposedly fairly young and chipper. He couldn't be there, but Tony Schiavone, an elderly man, at least 2 years older than me, he can be there.
How far away is Schiavone from Jacksonville? Is it a drive?
He lives in Charlotte. No, he lives in Atlanta now. That was fucking 6 hours, maybe. The point is, if he's going to fucking go out in public, for heaven's sake, so he didn't have to fly. JR would have had to fly, which is probably why he didn't. Excalibur, he needs to be run out of town on a rail, much less put on a fucking COVID-19 infected airplane. But anyway, so poor Tony, he's got to be the one to risk his life, but he also risked his professional career we'll get to that at the end. So he opens up with Cody and Omega on Color. What did you think of Cody on Color?
I thought there were positives. I thought there were negatives. I thought at times he was good. At times, I don't know. Everyone's energy was at a weird level. I mean, especially Omega. He started with Omega, and it was like he was doing a golf tournament.
Well, that's what, don't wait any longer for Cornette to knock Olivier. Yes, he sounds like he still makes faces and sounds like a fucking nerd, even when he's on Color. And, in the hush tones. Somebody on a YouTube video said he's got such a chill-sounding voice. Yeah. Chilly, like he's been dead for 3 days on ice in a morgue. Just boring, just blah. I liked Cody. He's never done that before, and it takes a while before you can master the art of color commentary, but at least he had a vocabulary. He put something into it. He was different, but he was pointing out a lot of shit in the matches, or, his historical references were mostly on point. I think he put the first Clash of Champions in Miami, but that's not his fault.
He said Darby Allin is like a young Sting. I like Darby Allin a lot. That's the worst comparison I've ever heard.
No, I can see where he was going with that. The blonde hair, the face paint, the fucking energy that he usually has. I liked Cody more than I didn't like him as far as being on Color, but it was different. But it was certainly better than they had an awkward show billboard at the top because Olivier's just useless in any capacity. But did you notice that Cody makes his entrance to the ring for his match, and Olivier ain't been on the air 5 minutes and admits to being a backyard wrestler? So I haven't had my friends announce me since I wrestled in the backyard, where you still ought to be, you fucking Harpo Marx looking goof. But how did they start the show out? Jimmy Havoc. How did he get there? Isn't he from England? They should have put him in quarantine before the world was ever even sick. Look at him. He's got to have something. Is it just that all the heavy illnesses he's got makes him immune to the coronavirus is how he was able to get there? What the fuck? So Cody versus Jimmy Havoc. None of the boys in the seats, the wimpiest, nerdiest color guy ever. and Cody has to have a match with Jimmy Havoc. And here's my note. It's ridiculous to put Cody in this situation of being competitive with this fucking guy. Cody is their main event guy. One of them, one of a very select few. He's one of the only guys that gets his matches over and can cut promos. Now I see why you never hear Olivier talk and do promos, because he sounds like such a simp. But Cody is one of their most valuable players. And yes, this did make more sense than any other Jimmy Havoc match ever. And yes, Cody did try to, he kept control of most of it. He tried to give him some stuff, but still the visual of this obviously fucking pale, fishy white, nobody, a small little fucking scarred up freak who does hardcore matches and staple guns people and all that shit, going fucking toe to toe with one of their main event guys for this long. You know, at least they didn't treat it like a training match like, you know, the WWE guys are. They worked hard, but goddamn, Jimmy Havoc. It went too long and it got old quick. You cannot ever use this corpse-looking fucking cretin in anywhere near the top in a major promotion, at least in the United States. And maybe in Japan, they like him when he sets himself on fire and stabs shit through his fucking protuberances or whatever. But to me, this just diminished Cody. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, it was the best Jimmy Havoc match I've ever seen.
Well, yeah.
I think, before I even get to Jimmy Havoc, I will say, I've said this before, Cody, it seems like he's always trying something in the match that he shouldn't be trying, and it is clunky. I think it was like he jumped off the ropes into a diamond cutter, and it just looked really bad.
No, he jumped off into Havoc Trapped the Arm. Wasn't that what it was? Or did I see that somewhere else?
He jumped off the rope, and he was supposed to catch Jimmy Havoc in a diamond cutter, even though he wasn't facing him. But it didn't look good to me. I think, I'm going to play devil's advocate here with you. They obviously had a very short crew, a very short staff. A small crew, I guess I'll put it, for this show.
They always have a short crew, but now they had a small one too.
They had a small crew, and the only heels that we really saw on this main show that worked were Kip Sabian, Sammy Guevara, and Jimmy Havoc, right? Because, I mean, the other guy, there was a squash guy, I don't remember any other, Jake Hagar, and they don't want to throw him into just any, I think what they did with him was actually all right.
Yeah.
So you didn't have too many guys that could work with Cody. I agree with you maybe about the length, that Cody should have won quicker because he is a main event guy and Jimmy Havoc is a YouTube AEW guy. There's like two different tiers of AEW stars. There's main roster guys and YouTube guys. And there's guys on television and there's guys that the billionaire was suckered into signing before he fully realized what he was going to get, and now he's got to hide them. You can put it that way too. He's a big boy. He makes his own decisions, Tony Khan. I'm not going to give him a pass on any of these signings, even though the executive vice presidents may have wanted some of them. But other than the length, the idea that Cody worked with him and beat him on TV, I don't have a problem with that because I think they didn't have too many guys. They needed Cody to beat a heel.
Yeah.
And you had him. I mean, like I said, we saw who was in the truck in the back. It was like Billy Gunn and his son and Dasha.
Boy, Cody and Billy Gunn would have been probably interesting. Come to think of it. I just can't see rewarding. When you put somebody like Jimmy Havoc on fucking television, it tells everybody in the world, well, I could do this too. It just demeans the business. He looks like shit, and nothing that he does in the ring can compensate for all the stupid staple gun, hardcore, scarred up bullshit that he's done. Remember I said he couldn't make the MLW show last year WrestleMania weekend because his arm opened up? He'd come to this country with his arm laid open like a goddamn gutted like a fish because of some fucking death match bullshit he'd done in fucking England where he sliced himself from asshole to appetite and missed out on the second day of the fucking two-shot because his arm opened up. It's just a fucking free. You don't want people like that in the locker room associating with the other. That's a coronavirus of a different kind. Putting death garbage match guys in fucking professional locker rooms normalizes them somehow to the rest of these guys that don't know that they should be shunned because of their fucking stupidity. Just in my opinion. And then Cody had to hit his finish twice on this fucking schlub. He did it like, I'm mad now. He didn't try to cover him after the first one, but still, it just rewards stupid behavior when people like that are used by supposedly major promotions.
I really liked I was going to say Aubrey. I always get Audrey Meadows in my head when I think of her. But I thought she was great. She's the best referee they have. I wish they just used her for every single match like you did with Hildebrand. She's so good.
Yeah, well, she's always got the game face on, and she slides into the counts, and she looks official, and she's got the body language. And then and I know some of their other referees, but goddamn, she's just in so much better physical condition, so perkier, so much more authoritative, and they don't bury her also because of that. They bury all the other referees, especially that poor fucking emaciated, bald-looking fuck that does all the tag team matches that just stands there, just waves his arms in circles because nobody even knows he's there.
That guy's the worst referee they have.
Hell. Well, but they make him the worst one. Who knows if he was actually refereeing something that made sense and was allowed to have some authority. He'd still look pretty wishy-washy physically. But anyway, the Jake the Snake promo. Explain to me why this guy, if you wanted to push a stupid gimmick like the Dork Order, explain to me why Jake the Snake is not the fucking exalted one leader of the Dark Order, because he could talk you into doing shit you didn't want to do. He has many times in the wrestling business talked people into doing shit they didn't want to do. You would believe him as a cult leader. You would believe him as somebody that was smarter than everybody else. You would believe him as somebody that was evil to the core and deceptive and cunning and manipulative.
Because he is.
And everything, because he is. He's being himself, and he's getting himself over. I'm not sure Archer, maybe not so much. But every time Jake speaks, Jake gets over. So why not have him as the leader of the Dork Order, because nobody else in that is or it will ever be over, and have Brody Lee come in on his own without that baggage of that horrible, fat, sloppy, masked fuck and his band of merry misfits dragging him down. Did they misplace all this shit, or is it just me?
I can see what you're saying. I think I'm not sold on Jake with Archer. I mean, we haven't even seen Archer wrestle yet other than the little vignette video, but I'm not sold on them together. And you do have a point about Jake being perfect for that role as a slimy, noted piss drinker, evil cult leader. Like, he works as that. We talked last week. I'm not a big fan of these vignettes. I'm okay with a vignette if there's a plausible reason why the camera is there. And this one started off that way. It's Jake, his fireside chat.
Yeah.
And there's a camera in front, and then all of a sudden there's a camera on the side. I almost feel like they should do something to explain why everyone has access to a production team. Like, say, Tony Khan got this unlimited budget from his dad, and what he decided to do is he got a bunch of film students, and he's given each main event wrestler a film student so that whenever they feel like they want to make a video to tell the world what they're thinking or what they're feeling or make it stylized, they have access to their own personal film student for, 6 months. And then after 6 months, you switch it up and you get a whole new batch of film students in there. Because everyone had a vignette. Like, every vignette on this is
I'm actually going to say now you're overthinking this.
Maybe.
It's a television program, so if a guy's sitting there talking, I can understand, yes, it's the thing now. If you're doing a sit down, you got one camera in front of you, one camera shooting on the side. You see it in other documentary programs. You even see it in other sporting programs and events. The UFC or whatever will do some of that. If a guy's just talking, then that's fine, because that doesn't expose anything. When there's physicality, when there's guys supposedly fighting, but yet you can see that there's editing and there's room for retakes and there's all this stuff, and this is supposed to be spontaneously happening, but then you got multiple camera angles that are already set up and etc. That's when it's bullshit. I thought it was bullshit in the WWF in the 90s, and I still think it's bullshit. they started, when wrestling got a budget, they started doing things that were counterproductive to making it look realistic, which is the whole point of the thing. So, but that only affects me not on just promos where a guy's talking, because we know it is a television program and they're not going to want to use a VHS tape. But when there's physicality, when there's supposedly a fight, when something goes wrong and there's obvious, editing for this thing and preparation for this thing that just broke loose, was not supposed to happen, wasn't pre-planned, fuck that. That just kills it.
But you see, I look at it like with this specific one, Jake is doing this great promo, basically threatening Cody. He's staring right into the camera. Having the second camera there on the side I thought was stupid, was a bad decision. You just wanted a one camera for the maximum impact of him staring there, threatening Cody.
Yeah, well, I didn't say it made a lot of sense, but I can forgive it.
Okay, all right.
You don't have to plead it to me anymore. I'm just saying it's not an expose. It's just overproduction. But so I'm not sure where Archer stands in all of this. I think Archer needs a manager. If MJF wasn't already doing everything else, and he has Wardlow, but Archer needs a smaller manager because Jake is as big as he is, and needs a fucking little Weasley manager, can take some bumps so Archer don't have to. And, I don't know. We'll see what happens. The Darby Allin video. I assume that was him speaking, doing the voiceover. I don't know that I've ever heard his voice, so that was nice. That was refreshing. I wrote, he talks. And then he was wearing the mask of the Inner Circle, but he was knocking Kip Sabian. Then he set some shit on fire. I'm sure for the age group that they're going for, this was just the bee's knees type of video.
Do you think maybe they recorded that video before? Because I mean, the whole lineup was kind of makeshift based on who.
Yeah, they put a different video or put a different voiceover on the video because he was wrestling Kip Sabian that night, but it was outtakes from where they fucked with the Inner Circle before. But hey, reusing shit in times of crisis, I'm not going to knock that. I will, however, knock this next match. Because Cody was back on color, and he's certainly a lot more interesting than Olivier, and he actually took it seriously here, and he had some good lines, even though their cue to the break was fucked. Apparently they keep doing commentary for Fight TV, but not on, so they were kind of halfway jacking off on TNT for about 30 seconds because they gave him a bad cue. But in this one, I'm not going to knock Darby Allin. I think Kip Sabian looks ridiculous. He looks like a fucking junior high schooler. And imagine Penelope Ford, who doesn't look bad, but the people she, fucking hangs around with are unsavory. But Penelope Ford left Jelly Nutella for Kip Sabian. She left one little fucking goof for another little fucking junior high school goof. Imagine how goofy Nutella must be if Kip Sabian was the fucking better choice here. Because they both look like they're 14. They have to get carded when they go in a bar. And Kip Sabian, what the fuck? He's 180 pounds and he just looks like a fucking high school kid. Darby Allin is special. He has that talent. He's got that unique image that is mainly him. He's actually realistic. He's a death-defying lunatic in real life. But he needs people to feed off of. Did you notice that? He needs that crowd more than a lot of guys to really... He was doing all his stuff, but you didn't get the same wow factor in an empty building because he's one of those underdog guys. And I'm putting him over when I'm saying this because it's a very special talent. The people get behind him when he's selling, and he gets into it more when the people are behind him. And by the time he breaks out the big stuff and they're going crazy, it just takes him a level above. That's not something that you can replicate in this environment, I didn't think.
I'm not as down on Kip Sabian as you are, because I think there's a role for him, whether it's the pussy boyfriend, the Penelope Ford, or just a guy who, he's an annoying, wimpy heel. I mean, I think there's a role for that. But they got
Sammy Guevara, and he's so much better at it.
But Sammy Guevara is not wimpy. Like last week, and by the way, on commentary, they're already saying that, the Colt Cabana thing from last week, you think Colt has something for Penelope? Are they booking the breakup of Penelope and Kip? I've seen how this works in the wrestling business, but I thought like last week with Colt Cabana, he was great in that role. He got smacked in the face, and then he left, and now you're waiting to see the Colt Kip Sabian payoff. But I'm not as down. I'm all right with Kip Sabian. I like him and Penelope Ford together, and I think Penelope Ford is a very, very attractive young lady, although she may hang out with some unsavory characters.
Yeah, but super bad. This fucking guy, super bad. It has to be a rib gimmick.
Rib for her pleasure.
Yeah, she looks like she's auditioning to be Lita Ford in fucking The Runaways. But anyway, did you notice Darby Allin won? That's where that match was where somebody came off and he caught his arm or whatever. But Darby Allin won out of nowhere with a sudden leg lock roll up. Tony called it the Gibson leg lock. Cody said, well, depending on what part of the country it's a Fuller leg lock. It wasn't either. I think he may have been trying for the Gibson leg lock, but he didn't get it.
Definitely wasn't a Fuller.
It looked nothing like the Fuller leg lock. But here's something. Haven't we said this before? Why doesn't anybody do the Gibson leg lock anymore? Why doesn't anybody do the Fuller leg lock anymore? One of the answers to that is, especially for the Fuller leg lock, but even for the Gibson leg lock, if you aren't 6 feet tall and you can't do a back bridge for the Gibson, or you just don't have legs as long as Robert Fuller's, or anything else as long as Robert Fuller's for that matter, don't fucking try it. The Gibson leg lock was a step over, toe hold, turn around into a back bridge that kept the guy down and had his legs trapped. And then if Robert did it, Ricky Morton or his brother Ricky Gibson had to fucking help pull him up, because once you got in that position, you couldn't get out yourself. Well, Darby Allin kind of did that, but kind of not. And then the Fuller leg lock, as we know, was a forward roll into what looked like a upwards figure four, and nobody else has ever done it. But your legs need to be like, because the only ones ever done it I've seen that looked right was Ron Fuller, Robert Fuller, and Jimmy Golden, and they all were 6'6" or more and had those long skinny legs.
And Buddy Fuller, that's it.
Well, and Buddy Fuller, who was 6'6" and had long skinny legs. So anyway, somebody ought to use those, especially since Darby Allin brought it to my mind, but he didn't do it. He invented his own thing.
And that works as a shoot, by the way. That's a knee bar.
Yes. That's how all these holds originated, because they actually were real until then people just started, well, I'll just do this, and there's no sense to it. But anyway, Jake Hager and Chico Adams, they finally had a nice quick squash match and then completely fucking tore down the house they built. They have a package of Hager getting tap outs in the cage, in MMA fights, action in wrestling, some of the heinous heel things he's done. And then have him just beat the fuck out of old Chico Adams. Thank you for coming, Chico. And then here comes Jon Moxley. And he gets face to face with Jake Hager, toes to toes and nose to nose, as they used to say. And he kicks his fucking ass and dumps him out of the ring. What the fuck? Your big monster, your big shooter, just actually, is that the first match he's had on AEW? First single match, or did he have another one?
First singles match, I think, on TV. He wrestled Dustin on the pay-per-view. Okay,
here's the guy's first fucking match, and you do the right thing. You have him beat some schlub in a minute, and then here comes the fucking babyface in and is face-to-face with him. Didn't even, while he was not looking, blindside him, because yes, Moxley is the kind of guy that can blindside a fucking heel and it not be a heel move because he's a fucking kick-ass babyface. Or in some way, they looked at each other and then they punched each other a couple times. Moxley got the better of it, hit his finish, his DDT. Hager gets up. So then Moxley just says, fuck it, and just fucking does something else and dumps him out of the ring. And they're going on about it. My God, he got up after the DDT and then got dumped out of the fucking ring like a piece of shit and wandered off with nobody to pull him back, pull him away. Just decided, well, I can't beat this fucking guy. So what was that all about?
I think the direction's good, going with Moxley versus Hager as a program in between whatever Moxley's going to do next.
That's fine. Then Moxley should have DDT'd him on his head, and Hager got up and fucking dumped Moxley out of the fucking ring.
I completely agree with you, and that's what I thought watching in real time. Because the commentators did the right thing. He got up from the DDT. They're pointing it out. They're pushing it. And then, Hager's the one who slinks off.
Oh, well, no, wait a minute. Hager did a move that Moxley then got up from, didn't he? And then Moxley dumped him out of the ring. I'm trying to put this out of my mind. But the point is, we've established who is the dog of the yard in that situation. Hager slunk off because he didn't want any more of Moxley. That's the only fucking way you can look at it. There was nobody to pull him back. There was obviously nobody fucking that could come in between them to stop whatever he would want to do to Moxley. Moxley looked him in the face. They scuffled for a minute. Moxley dropped him on his head. He got back up and didn't sell Moxley's finish, so Moxley ended up dumping him out of the fucking ring, and he wandered off.
Notwithstanding the booking mistake there in that angle, I have to say, when I was watching that video and I started watching the squash match, and I'm glad they had a squash match. That's a great thing to have on your show to get someone over. It really hit me how much better AEW has used Jake Hager than WWE used him for years, even though they put the world title on him at one point, as Jack Swagger. I don't think he said one word in a promo. He looks like a badass. He looks tall. He just stands there. He goes in there. He kills guys. And I'm more into him now than I ever was him as Jack Swagger, doing promos, and then when he was with Dutch.
Yeah.
I do got to give AEW credit there. Him with the Inner Circle, him with Jericho. They've established him as this badass. Another reason why him leaving after the Moxley thing was so stupid. But they really have used him so much better than WWE to the point where he doesn't feel like another one of these reclamation projects. It feels like a fresh guy there.
And plus, it's been a while, right?
Yeah, it's been a while.
So people have had time to get him out. And actually, I don't know that I ever saw Jack Swagger in the WWF. I don't know if we ever had a project where I was forced to watch whatever part of the program he was on. But even though Dutch was with him, I always liked to watch Dutch, but I was, what the fuck. But then Moxley does his promo after the break in the back. He was just in the fucking ring. They have a microphone in the ring. He could have said whatever he wanted to say right there, but he was in the back. I didn't understand that either. I assume you didn't either.
I don't have answers for you on that.
Moving on. Now, Brody Lee, the video of Brody Lee having dinner. This is what we want to see from the Exalted One. He's having dinner. He's dressed up in a suit. He's eating this big steak. It looks like they had Morton's open up just for them. That was a good-looking fucking steak. And the au gratin potatoes on one of those sides. But he's got, what are their names? Silver and Reynolds. They're two stooges, right, that they've signed up to this thing. He won't let them eat until he finishes eating, so he kicks one of them out, and the other guy sneezes, I guess, to get coronavirus on him, so he kicks him out. But the whole thing was he treats his underlings crummy, right?
Well, you know what that was, don't you?
Well, and everybody making fun of that Vince doesn't like people sneezing.
Well, the whole thing was Vince. Apparently, it was not just the sneezing, but it was, you've been around him at a steakhouse. Apparently, some of those other, not wanting people to eat before he eats, that's a Vince thing?
Okay, I get. Well, he didn't want him to eat until he finished eating, which sounds more like an S&M thing to me. I've eaten in front of Vince before. He would look at me when he had the fucking turkey sandwich on rye bread with mustard, so there was no fat involved, and I had the chicken fingers I was dipping in double ranch, but we were eating at the same time. He didn't ask me to hold my chicken fingers till he finished his turkey sandwich.
Have you had steak with Vince?
Yes, I have. And I ate it at the same time, just not as big a bites. He attacks that fucking steak like he attacks everything else. But no, the sneezing may have been a knock at Vince, but you can't eat until I'm finished. That was, obviously he controls these people because he's the leader, but I don't know what the fuck's going on. And the dork order, once again. But they had his debut against QT Marshall. Why QT would remind us in Ring of Honor every fucking time how his name was pronounced. I don't know why he won't tell these fuckers, because they keep calling him Marshall. It's QT Marshall.
Meanwhile, Cody's on commentary saying this is his best friend in wrestling.
Yeah, his best friend, QT Marshall. Anyway, okay, a lot of people have taken up for Brody Lee with me, say, hey, this fucking guy, he was misused up there and he was used as a top guy, but they didn't let him to his full ability or whatever, and he wasn't, beaten to powder on television because he was hurt and off and then whatever the fuck. What was he fucking wearing? He looked like he was wearing bell-bottom pleather pants and a tank top with zippers all over it. But pictures of zippers, not zippers themselves. Was that what you saw?
It was a interesting outfit. He used to wear just street clothes in WWE, and I believe he did his Brody Lee before he went up there. So I don't know. It looks like he went to whoever makes Chris Hero's outfits and said, "Make me something."
This was it was a little bit over a squash. QT got some offense, but it was obviously meant to be Brody Lee's showcase.
Did he miss that first boot?
Yes. Yeah. Completely whiffed right by him. And then the clothesline that was the finish, QT took a great bump, but there was no contact on that either, but it was quickly. So the whole thing is, I thought QT Marshall looked like the guy I'd want to push out of this match. He looked better. He was a better all-around performer. I don't see a star here with the way they're presenting Brody Lee. I've never met this guy. I'm not knocking this guy. He's got good size. He's obviously been around the business for a while. Some people have said good things about him. The way he is being presented here in looks and in video and being attached to the worst gimmick of all time, I don't know what the fuck. This did not get this guy over. If you bring him in by himself without a bunch of job guys around him, put him in something that makes him look like a badass instead of a fucking, the casting call for the Village People didn't quite work out. I don't know what the fuck that outfit was. Maybe don't have him wrestle after he's just eaten a big steak because he was sluggish. And have him big boot people and fucking put his foot on their chest and beat him 1, 2, 3. And have him connect with the fucking boot. Apologize first, boot later. What this is not doing, and he looks like, I assume that's how he took the name Brody Lee, because he looks like Bruiser Brody, but yet he was talking like a fucking stockbroker in the VTR segment. What, as Dusty would say on the FCW documentary, who are you? Tell me who the fuck you are, baby. Who the fuck are you? So that was that.
Sure was.
I noted they're forced to show more tape from previous weeks to update us. That's a good thing, because that's one thing that the WWE, I've noticed, overproduces their packages and tries to give you a 6-month story in a 1-minute package. And a lot of them are good, but some of it's but there's just no wrestling programs anymore that just come back from break with a graphic that says last week on an AEW Dynamite and show the fucking finish of the match in a minute or less. They're going into the fucking finish and here's what happens, ding, 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 and there's the fucking chaos, and get a good outline from your announcer and and then come back to somebody that was in that issue coming to the ring or going to talk or whatever. It's just a little refresher. If they show more tape from the previous week or previous weeks to update us, that's a good thing. But nobody does it simply and easily anymore. AAA now has a mega title. The mega King Kong Godzilla, as Truth Martini used to say. They've got a mega title that they've given to Olivier. He's defending some other promotion's belt on their TV now. He's already a tag team champion, so doesn't that make it look like complete horseshit that if the tag team title was so important, why would he be a heavyweight champion in another promotion? I don't get that either. I don't get the whole guy. They're appealing to the smart fans, is what they're doing, which they're already there anyway, and we know there's a limited number of those. But now they're defending other people's titles.
Yeah, I don't know. I wonder why all of a sudden that title was put on TV. The only guess I had, and this is just a guess, is maybe AAA actually needed something because they can't run any shows. Maybe they wanted something with Omega if he's their champion. So they taped it here, but that doesn't make much sense either, I guess, now that I think about it.
Or maybe Olivier is just a mark for himself and wants to show all the other marks how many belts he has. Anyway, even when entering an empty arena, he looks like a boring, pretentious twat. But Sammy Guevara, I know he was following Olivier, so whatever didn't make sense in this match was his fault, or was not his fault. It was fucking Olivier. But what a smarmy heel. He looked great, even though he's painfully pale. You know, he brought drawings of his friends and put them on the chairs. He made out with the picture of Brandy. He worked his ass off. But I made the note for at one point they fought on the floor forever, and they did a bunch of moves back and forth. And with you, last week, no crowd forced the guys to work, and the matches all made sense. Remember, even the Lucha Brothers match made sense last week, right? Olivier can't do that. So they just did a lot of moves to each other like there were people there, and it was an Olivier match just with no people. So I kind of zoned out. I didn't really follow it very closely. I don't care. I wrote that Sammy Guevara has tons of personality and potential, and then they did a bunch of shit to each other, and Olivier won. Imagine that. Tell me what I missed.
Well, obviously, you go into this with a little bit of a bias against Kenny Omega. I thought it was a good Kenny Omega match. Not having a crowd obviously hurt it. If there was a crowd there, it would probably be even better. It's weird seeing him do a lot of his pointing and stuff when there's no
gesticulating,
crowd there.
Gesticulating.
When there's no crowd there. I agree with you on Sammy Guevara. I've been high on him since he got rid of that panda head. Yeah, that was it.
Alrighty,
I thought it was all right. I thought it was all right, though. For all things considered, I thought that was all right, and I thought the Darby Allin match was all right. I thought those were the two highlights of the episode.
It was a better athletic endeavor than like the girls on fucking SmackDown or whatever the other week, but it just, just the look of Olivier, just the look of him, and having heard, him say the things like, well, I was never trained and it doesn't really matter. I don't even like wrestling. It's to me a way to express my art. Shit just falls out of his mouth every time he opens it. Anyway, I was looking forward, as I mentioned last week. Okay, Matt Hardy, here's another big star, right? And they need big stars, and they need mainstream stars. And I want to see where this is going. Matt Hardy and Chris Jericho, how can this go sideways? We found out. I didn't even mind because Jericho, when he makes his entrance, Chris Dispenza, he's been a cameraman for fucking 25 years for wrestling. He's worked on a bunch of projects I've been on. I thought that I got a kick out of seeing him doing that, singing Judas, blah, blah, blah. Jericho starts the promo offering Matt Hardy the chance to join the inner circle, just like he did Moxley. Any of the big stars, he wants them in the inner circle. That's great. Here comes a drone into the ring.
Well, now, hold on. You didn't even address the fact that this drone had already made an appearance earlier in the episode. I don't even remember when it was. The Nick Jackson training video, or not even training video. He was training in his garage gym, and the drone... Did you see this part?
Actually, was that either going into or coming out of a break?
It may have been. I don't remember when in the show it was.
As soon as they're going to break, I start fast forwarding. If it doesn't look like wrestling, I wasn't stopping the fast forward. Now I come to think of it. I thought it was like one of those car insurance commercials. A guy standing outside his garage. Yes, I did see it. I just didn't know what the fuck it was.
The drone was in Southern California. Nick Jackson was doing some chin-ups in his garage. The drone drops down from the sky to film him there. And then when Nick Jackson goes, hey, what's that? And walks out of his garage, the drone flies back away. Just zooms up.
Okay, actually, I thought that was one of those car insurance commercials with a guy out in his driveway because I was fast forwarding. So anyway.
The general?
Well, You could save with the general. So Vanguard 1 comes into the ring and Jericho's talking to it. And and he's making the best of this, but especially with no people. It might have worked better with people. And he was kind of, I'll get you the best mechanical cigars to smoke and etc. and all this stuff. And then he gets hot at the drone when the drone flies away and he starts getting, I'm thinking certainly to God, Matt needs to come out and we can have a good confrontation and or some good physicality, and this will just be a momentary silliness. And then Matt appears at the top of the arena. Okay, boy, it's going to take him a while to get down there if they're going to have any kind of, that's the first thing I thought of. Tell the people what happened after that, Brian, when Jericho's in the ring and Matt Hardy appears at the top of this big-ass arena.
At this point in the program, through several very clunky camera shots, Matt Hardy teleported down to the ring, making several stops in each level, the Loge Reserve, the Mezzanine, eventually ending up right at ringside.
And Tony Schiavone had to sell it like he was seeing it in person. Not only that this is the most preposterous thing I've ever seen, that somebody is teleporting, and not only that it was done, obviously, as with multiple exposures of the camera, because at some points you can see Chris's head suddenly tick a different place and then tick back again.
Yep. And
everybody knows how that's done. But Tony Schiavone actually said, "Am I dreaming? Look what he's done." Tony Schiavone had to call it like Matt Hardy was really disappearing and then appearing in different places simultaneously until he got all the way down to the ring. One of their announcers, who is supposed to be their salesman, if you go to the fucking mall and you go to the appliance store and you say, "I need a new refrigerator," and you ask the guy at the store to tell you about all their new refrigerators, and the first thing he tells you about this one refrigerator is, "Well, did you know that if you put a dead dog in the freezer and leave it overnight, it will come back to life?" You're not going to buy that refrigerator, and you're never going to go back in that store again because that guy's a lying sack of shit. So they just buried their announcer, made their entire program look fucking like idiocy. And before anybody else opened their mouth from there, I turned the TV off. While I still like Matt Hardy and Chris Jericho, I have given up on enough old friends for doing stupid, phony bullshit. I could not watch the rest of this, or I'll hate both of them forever. So what did I miss, if anything?
You missed one of the stupidest segments I've ever seen on any wrestling show. And this is everything I've complained about with AEW in the past. And I've really liked the direction they've gone in since the beginning of the year. I've liked the last several episodes. But I hate when it's stuff that if it was on WWE TV, everyone would kill it. But because it's AEW and they're Teflon with a certain fan base, people will say, "Oh, I thought it was good." Or, "Oh, I thought it was funny." Or, "What do you mean you didn't like Jericho doing a promo on a fucking drone?" Or, "What do you mean you didn't like him teleporting down to the ring?" And then he started talking about the essence of the fans that are there, and he saw Abraham Lincoln in the crowd and Martin Luther King in the crowd. Oh, no, he said this. Matt Hardy. I tweeted this out. You know what? Vince McMahon may have been right to limit Matt Hardy's creative input. And you may have been wrong last week when you said he could have been a booker for Jim Crockett. Because Matt Hardy's creative instincts certainly do not mesh with what I want on a professional wrestling program. And it's not sports-based presentation in any way. And they've been going in a direction. AEW's product has been getting so good lately, or at least much better than it was. And then you take a massive step back with this cartoon bullshit that may have worked in Impact a few years ago, a show not known for being good. But now a show not known. Just put the period there, a show not known. But now you take that and you take this awful community theater bullshit that Matt Hardy's doing.
Fucking hell.
And you apply it here, and then eventually...
So I'm suitably chastened that that I attempted to say that Matt Hardy was going to be a big addition last week on the program. I am suitably chastened. I take that back. If he, in his first appearance, is teleporting to the ring and then sees Abraham Lincoln, unless he took a big fucking hit of fucking purple acid right before the fucking show, he shouldn't have been seeing Abraham Lincoln in the crowd. But I guess I apologize now for saying that's why I didn't want to watch any more of it. I've always liked those fucking guys. I don't know why Jericho would put up with shit like this when he's really having to carry the fucking company on his back, especially as far as the heel side goes. And why would you do this? I apologize for saying anything good about anybody.
I want an alternative to the WWE style of entertainment, not their take on the WWE style of entertainment, their take on comedy, their take on supernatural gimmicks. I don't want that. I want sports-based wrestling. And I think there's a lot of people who want that too. And then you deliver this shit. And then eventually Jericho says, abracadabra, watch what I'm going to do to you. And Sammy Guevara comes in and attacks Matt Hardy. Cody and Omega make the save. So now they're aligned with this supernatural goof. And then we're supposed to believe that as Jericho and Guevara are escaping, that Matt Hardy, through the power of his mind, is causing the pyro to go off on whichever exit they try to escape from so that they can't escape. So Matt Hardy not only teleports, he also controls the pyro mentally, telepathically.
Okay, hold on. That'll be the last AEW Dynamite review we ever fucking do. Because if they're going to start this shit, my blood pressure won't take it. I'm done with that. That's what I thought was going to fucking happen. I just didn't think it was going to happen from their big stars. I thought it was going to happen from their fucking Outlaw Mud Show stars. But now you're telling me that the guys who have actually been in the business long enough to know better are doing stupider shit than these fucking outlaw goofs Invisible Man bullshit.
Cody and Jericho were totally involved with this. And it was pathetic. Matt Hardy's catchphrase is delete. I couldn't wait to delete this off my fucking DVR. I couldn't wait. Awful. Just awful. All the progress you guys have made as a promotion. And then you do this bullshit. And someone will go, but it would get over if there were people there. It's garbage. It's not good. It's community theater.
If there had been people there, how would they have worked that teleporting business? They couldn't have.
I don't know.
Because it can't actually fucking happen.
And if we're supposed to believe that Matt Hardy was on acid and that's why he saw Martin Luther King in the audience, I guess we're supposed to believe that Tony Schiavone took the same acid.
Yeah.
Because he saw the magic trick happening in front of him and couldn't believe it.
I can't believe it. Am I dreaming? No, Tony, you're fucking ruining your credibility and everything you've built in your announcing career, calling stupid shit on national television that you shouldn't be involved with because it shouldn't be being done.
Now, let's see what happens. I'm curious now what's going to happen next week, because the last time there was something that was, I shouldn't say, because AEW's fans, it's kind of like they're split on this. You hear a lot of people like, oh, did you not watch what he was doing at Impact? It was just like this. It's great. And other people are going, no, this is complete dog shit. And I'm in that aisle, by the way.
Well, no, I didn't watch any of the shit he was doing at Impact because people told me about it. And because I liked Matt and Jeff Hardy, I specifically didn't want to see it. and now, unfortunately, we're having to see it on real television instead of it just Impact. What?
But Tony Khan apparently took the reins after that Dork Order beatdown of the Young Bucks, which was the probably single worst episode of AEW Dynamite. Everyone, even their hardcore fans, hated it. This one, because there's a lot of stupid fans, people are split on. And then you hear people, oh, what do you have a problem with it? It's fun, or it was funny.
And that is exactly why I despise most of these fucking DIY, do-it-yourself, untrained, outlaw, cosplay fucking wrestlers, because they have, through the fact that they have no ability to get over in this business as it existed, because they're not good enough, they're just allowed to do whatever stupid, whacked-off shit they want to do, and that makes a lot of these fans, who don't know any better in some cases, and who are obviously intellectually challenged, think that it's okay to laugh at everything, and that this is all supposed to be fun. And the people that tell me, oh, you just must hate fun. No, I hate stupid, disrespectful shit done by stupid, disrespectful people about a profession that I take seriously. There's a difference. Like fun, where you're supposed to have fun. And wrestling used to be fun when it wasn't phony and silly. I don't like that these guys make the fans think that this is okay to think that way about something, that it's obviously not okay to present that way, because nobody gives a shit past this little fucking collection of outlaw mud show fans that they have fostered. You see the same thing now. This is the program that on my DVR guide says a new league introduced in 2019 that introduces real sports analytics and etc. to the fucking, real sports analytics. So next week, Matt Hardy is going to have a graphic. Matt has only teleported 4 times in the last week. That's your real sports analytics. Take your real sports analytics, Tony, and shove them up your ass. I knew this was going to happen. I knew it. You got a guy that's read newsletters for fucking 40 years and thinks he can do it. He gets involved with the wrong people, the fucking people like the Young Bucks and Olivier that have created some kind of mass hysteria from this small group of fucking mentally challenged people that wants wrestling to be a goddamn joke. And together, they will let the inmates run the asylum and present stupid, phony, silly wrestling. And all they had to do to change my mind was not present stupid, phony, silly wrestling. And what have they presented since day one? Stupid, phony, silly wrestling. It doesn't matter if you have a goddamn Shakespearean drama break out in a fucking dogfight out in the alley. Nobody's going to pay attention to the fucking Shakespearean actors because they're in the middle of watching all these fucking stray, mangy dogs fucking around. If you don't have a serious program all the way through, you don't have a serious program. Why is the fucking comedy bullshit in the third match not indicative of what the rest of your program is like? If that's phony, then the main event's phony too. If you don't fucking take yourself seriously from first match to last match, from start to finish, from the first second of the program till the last second, and present wrestling legitimately, seriously, as it's supposed to be, then you're a fucking clown show. There is no reason to do the activity of professional wrestling unless you are presenting it as if it is real. Just like there is no reason to do a movie and spend $100 million on it, and in the middle of it, have the fucking 2 main stars that are fighting each other break into a little dance routine and giggle about the script.
This is why you need one booker with a backbone, and you can't just have guys saying, well, this is what I want to do, and then you're like, you know what? Be free creatively. Express yourself. No. This was, I'll tell you, you could take all the Dark Order shit and all the Orange Cassidy stuff and the Marco stunt and the awful Jelly Nutella matches. You could take them all. This was the single most embarrassing thing I've seen on their show to me. And I've given them a lot more slack than you. And I couldn't believe Chris Jericho. I guess I should. I mean, he's done a lot of stupid shit in his life, but he's been so good on AEW and so good in his role. And now he's cutting promos on inanimate objects that fly, and then dealing with a teleporting guy who blocks him with fire after seeing Abraham Lincoln in the crowd. And Cody, who gets a free pass from everybody, he's in the middle of this too. It's just, this was infuriating to me. And I can't believe that people will justify it and defend it more than anything else on that show. More than you could take any Omega criticism you have. This was the single most embarrassing thing I've ever seen associated with AEW.
And imagine what territory that takes in. That takes in Marco Stunt and JoJo the Dog-Faced Boy. So you know what? I'm tired of looking for bright linings in this thing because I knew it from the start, and they've done nothing but back up my opinion. None of them can be serious. And now they're taking established stars and fucking putting them in the goddamn clown kiddie pool also. So I turned it off before I had to fucking subject myself to that. But should we watch this fucking program anymore, or is this just the end of it?
I think we should. You know, like I said, the Dark Order episode from, I think, December was the worst episode they ever did. And the story is Tony Khan took the reins after that.
No, fucking Tony Khan taking the fucking reins.
I'm not saying he's the guy.
No, but here's the thing.
Creatively with
Here's the thing. You said they needed a booker with backbone.
Yes.
Okay, number one, if this was 25 years ago, everybody in the locker room, Tony Khan would have been the guy that they turned upside down and shook for change after fucking school and stole his lunch money. A nerd with glasses that they went up and thumped his fucking nose and gave him a wedgie. And that's the way they would have treated him, because he was a fucking mark that had enough money to get in the fucking business and didn't know who to get involved with, and that's why they've got a shit show now. Now that the guys aren't real men anymore and they don't give people wedgies and steal their fucking lunch money and etc., they're just conning the fucking guy because he's still got all that money, so they're making friends with him and buddying up to him, and he's letting them do whatever their fucking creative hearts desire. And the people who benefited off of this television show were all the people stuck at home that could not get there due to risk of deadly disease, who didn't have to be on that thing, and like Tony Schiavone, embarrass himself as he's never embarrassed himself before. So they killed their announcer, their debuting new star, and their fucking biggest star, Chris Jericho, all in one fucking segment, and their television program, by just being stupid, because it's a goddamn television show to them rather than a wrestling show. And that's the thing that I've been saying from the start, and nothing has changed my mind. These fucking dipshits think they're back into fucking independence and everybody wants to giggle, and they don't realize that it's a bigger world now, and it's a bigger audience they're trying to get, and they ain't going to get none of them like that. If anybody believes that a motherfucker teleported from the top of the arena to the fucking ring, if anybody believes that really happened, then they need to be put away. They're not going to be buying fucking tickets or watching TV shows. They're going to be locked up in a rubber room at the Puzzle Factory. And the only way that you get people to really invest time and money and passion and energy is to give them something they can believe in. And if you don't try to make people, even though the cause is lost now, but if you don't present wrestling as if it was real, then there's no goddamn reason to do it, because then you're just doing a fucking fake fight scene in front of a bunch of fucking stupid people. Oh, fuck.
I really wonder if Jim Ross was there, how he would have called that, because he would have been on commentary.
I bet you Jim Ross would have figured out a way to go to the bathroom. If Jim Ross ever calls a man teleporting from one place to another, I will lose all my respect for everybody in the world. It'll just all evaporate. That'll be the last fucking straw. Apparently, I'm the only one who just has any standards or principles and just will just not be involved in just any goddamn stupid thing just because somebody tells me to. But you know what, Brian? I got news for you. If you or any of the members of the cult of Cornette out there would like to sue All Elite Wrestling for impersonating a wrestling promotion,
yeah,
well, I know who you can call.
Call Stephen P. News. If you need to sue. An outlaw mud show or two. Still to the rest.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, now more than ever, now that all these big corporations are getting trillions of dollars from the federal government to fuck us again, well, you need somebody standing up for your rights. And now that they've replenished their bank accounts, I'm sure that the big pharmaceutical companies are going to fuck us on the COVID cure. I'm sure that the big banks are going to fuck us around again. I'm sure that all the big corporations are going to feel like it's a field day and they can do whatever they want to the little people. And that's where Stephen P. New comes in. because at newlawoffice.com, 888-692-8084, Stephen and his crack staff fight for your rights, not the rights of the big companies that have hurt you, poisoned you, given you illnesses, harmed your families, or otherwise basically made your lives living hells. And speaking of living hell, if everybody wants to take up a class action suit because they were promised a wrestling promotion and got a fucking cross between a high school drama class and a fucking amateur science fiction film, then Stephen P. New can represent you as well, because there's got to be a case here somewhere. But one way or the other, he's one of us. He's a wrestling fan. He knows Trump's a piece of shit, and he works for you, not against you. Stephen P. New, newlawoffice.com, 888-692-8084. Maybe he can sue Vanguard One.
On behalf of Arcadian Vanguard, I would endorse that.
That's right. You know what? You have Arcadian Vanguard trademarked, and that goddamn Vanguard One is using your name and likeness. Well, maybe not your likeness. You don't look like that.
I don't. Not anymore.
You don't have little fucking helicopter wheels on top of your head anymore, ever since you went on that diet. So, and you don't have a video camera for a nose either. Not since you went to that plastic surgeon I hooked you up with. But otherwise, you look just like Vanguard One. Anyway, Stephen P. New, get even with Stephen. And boy, and I'll tell you what, he is still fighting the good fight against the Outlaw Mud Show fucks who've come up with every trick in the book to try to duck and dodge, and they are crying and whining and squealing like a pig under a gate. But the only reason he hadn't shut them down completely is because the courts have been shut down. But coming up soon, you're going to hear much less about Outlaw Mud Show wrestlers and much less about Outlaw Mud Show t-shirt companies, because both of them are going to be out of business as soon as the courts reopen. And he can do the same thing for you. Stephen P. New, newlawoffice.com, 888-692-8084. Now, should we go from someone impersonating a wrestling promotion to a wrestling promotion impersonating another wrestling promotion?
This sounds like it could only be promising, yes.
Well, I watched the FCW documentary on the WWE Network, and there are marked differences, and we will go through them. But in some cases, if they just did a fucking audio edit and put OVW in the space of guys' lips saying FCW and put the OVW banner up on the wall instead of FCW, they could have done a 30-minute OVW documentary. And I had never realized to the extent of what they took from us. But it makes sense now. I never saw it when it was going on, but it makes sense now.
Well,
and
I guess before we get going, we should tell the audience here, because I don't know if we've officially said it. You have now officially signed up for the WWE Network.
We said that at the top of the program, but that was a long time ago.
That was a very long time ago.
Vanguard One has been in my head. Very long time ago.
But you now have the WWE Network. There's going to be various things you can watch and review here on the Experience, and also, of course, on the new Patreon, patreon.com/Cornette. But this finally gives you access to these documentaries, the classic footage, contemporary stuff like the NXT takeovers that everyone always says, oh, I really want Jim to review this match. And you go, well, it wasn't on TV, so I can't see it. Now you will finally be able to see the good and the bad.
And it's still not on the one TV in the house here, in the Castle Cornette, the one TV I wanted to get this thing on so that I could watch it in comfort is the one TV I can't get the fucking thing on. My TV in the TV room, 82 inches, because it's 8 years old. It's not a smart TV. Well, what the fuck? It's a beautiful fucking television with a beautiful picture, but you and Stacy together trying to figure out how to fucking run the Chromecast from the zipper to the fucking flannel and fucking back across to round through to the, I don't know what the fuck, round its elbow to get to its wrist. The bedroom TV is a smart TV, but I don't have access to that 24 hours a day. Stacy and the puppy need to sleep. I get up early in the morning. The TV out in the chick cave with the hot tub and everything, that's a smart TV, but Stacy's got all that set up. I don't know how to work that fucking thing. I got a TV here in the office, which is really just a monitor because it's what I use to edit videotape and stuff. That's why I've got all of my video machines, just like it's supposed to be. Nothing digital. Everything videotape. I've got VHS. I've got Super VHS. I've got Beta. I've got High 8. I've got 3/4-inch U-matic. I'm a badass videotape dubber and editor because you can work with that shit. But the only place that I can watch this WWE Network in my office is on this fucking computer, which means I got to sit here in my office chair and put my fucking headphones on to listen to it and look at the fucking computer screen. But I did it.
Well, obviously, when it comes to FCW, and a lot of what I know from it is from this documentary, because I never watched it when it was actually taking place, there are probably a lot of similarities to OVW, but also a lot of differences, I would imagine.
Well, yes, and I'm not going to knock FCW, and I like Steve Kern, and I'm sure he worked his ass off on this. But John Laurinaitis is the key here. He was wanting to get rid of OVW because we wouldn't do everything he told us to do. And we'll get into this in more detail, but while they refused in those days to own the developmental territories because of insurance concerns or whatever reason they came up with, they wanted full say in everything that went on. And, you know, Jim Ross, when he was the head of talent relations, his opinion was, if you can't follow their rules, you can't follow ours. We were running a promotion, a small territory, but a territory that had a training program. Whereas all Laurinaitis wanted was a training program and was not really concerned whether we did any outside business or did anything else otherwise and how it impacted the WWE. So therefore, he started trying to make his own. And the reason why they picked Florida was because that's where, when he wasn't in Connecticut, he wanted to live in Florida, and everybody else lived. Gerald Briscoe, a lot of the guys lived in Florida. It was more convenient. It was also insane to start a wrestling promotion in Florida, but they didn't start a wrestling promotion. So this is what I got to get over. They started a wrestling school, and that school served their purpose quite well, but it was never a legitimate wrestling promotion. And we'll talk about the differences. But as far as the documentary, they played a little bit with the timeline. FCW didn't just start right up after they took guys from OVW and Deep South. They were working on it for quite a while. They sent Steve Kern came up to fucking OVW for Danny Davis to tell him what he had done, which is why that the FCW setup, once they got, to their final location, looked exactly like OVW. It is exactly with the banners on the wall and the fucking converted warehouse that was customized for the offices and the training facility and to shoot the TV in. That was OVW. They sent Steve up to figure out what we were doing and how to copy that. Laurinaitis could not, he couldn't tell us what to do. I mean, it was ridiculous in some instances. Like I've told the story before, they didn't want cables for the ropes. They wanted real ropes. Well, real ropes don't work on a training ring. They stretch and they break and people get hurt, which happened as soon as they made OVW switch to ropes when I was gone. One time they sent us fucking 3 sets of ropes and a guy down to show us how to tie them. And then we fucking put all those in storage and kept using our cables that we liked and wanted to use on our fucking ring. But anyway, the reason why Florida would not work for a wrestling promotion is because, especially at that time, 2007, running wrestling in Florida to try to make money was death. TNA was running Orlando at Universal Studios and giving away all the tickets for free. You could see Kurt Angle and Sting and every big star in the world for free. Every other little independent in Florida was running around the whole state and drawing 100 people or 200 people. Now then, when FCW went, there was another fucking wrestling promotion. Florida was known as a place you either 100 people went to a little independent show or you got into the big shows free. And Florida also was a harder TV market to break into. That's why they spent very little time in this documentary on the FCW TV show. One of the things they glossed over was, unless I'm mistaken, and somebody can certainly fucking chime in if I am, they never actually got on a broadcast station anywhere in the state of Florida. They were on a sports network. because you couldn't crack into broadcast TV in Tampa, Orlando, Miami. Those are major markets. So they couldn't get broadcast TV. They also didn't have any mid-size arenas that they could run, like we had the Louisville Gardens, and then later on when they closed the Gardens, Six Flags. It was dead. Florida was dead for wrestling. So it would just be a school running shows, but no big crowds, no major events to build your television to. They wouldn't exist. And that was fine with them. They didn't want a lot of guys. I found out later on I found out some while we were running it. They didn't want people to see the guys in developmental at all. And now NXT is the best fucking television show. The developmental is the best show. But anyway, that's the thing like having the bunch of rings in the building. Laurinaitis was hell-bent on that. Have 3 rings. No. Why not? Because it's confusing. We have one trainer holding one class in one ring, and everybody gets a chance to participate, and everybody that's not participating at that specific time gets a chance to watch and pay attention. When you got 3 rings in a warehouse, all you've got is a bunch of ring noise and people taking bumps and boom, boom, boom. And one group's over here learning something. The other group's over there learning something. It's fucking distracting. And Danny Davis told him that. We're not going to have multiple rings. We're going to have one ring. This is what we're going to do. This is the way we do it. He couldn't stand it. So that's why Laurinaitis basically went around looking for a way to start an OVW without actually having to fucking deal with OVW. And they made poor Kern put his name on everything to be responsible financially and liable legally, just like poor old Danny Davis, because they refused to own it. As a matter of fact, one time right before one of my last blow up, Danny Davis had got so mad, he even said, look, I can come up with a price. You can own this whole thing and you can be in charge of everything and tell us what to do. Because everything they wanted us to do was contrary to our good business in Louisville. They would call me up every Wednesday at TV and say, well, put so-and-so on TV. It's not ready to be on TV. I'll tape something that you can see. Well, we want to see it on TV. Well, I'm not going to put somebody that's not ready to be in front of people on my television show because my fucking face is on it and my name's on it. And this is my hometown. The process was when they came to the program, whether they were signed or unsigned, they started in class. Rip Rogers ran the class. They hated Rip because he'd tell people the truth. Say, you're fucking rotten. And he cussed a lot. And he wasn't politically correct. But he was a great trainer because he'd been through everything. And he would tell the guys, now, look, you shouldn't do this. You're not supposed to do this. This makes no sense to do this. But this is the way they want you to do it. So do it that way because they're paying you. But he was too honest. So they hated that. But Rip ran the classes. Danny ran the business. And I booked and announced. And I would see the guys in class, and I'd get Rip and Danny's recommendation. Then I'd put them on live events, not televised, and I'd see how they looked, and I'd see if I got some ideas from them. And then, or if they were ready, then I would put them on television. And I was as particular about my television, even more so than everything else that I do. So only the best fucking guys made it in the best spots, whether they had contracts or not. That's another thing they didn't like. They wanted us to push all the contract guys. I kept saying, well, unfortunately, some of the guys that you have signed suck, and some of the guys we've found are really good, so I'm featuring the guys that are outperforming the other guys. Your contract guys need to catch up and work harder. They didn't like that. So for a variety of reasons, they had to get away from it. And that's what Danny at one point, especially with the Orton fiasco, when we had Randy Orton booked for Six Flags 3 months in advance. And it was one of our biggest client. They paid us as much for the summer shows as fucking the WWE paid all year to OVW directly. And then they told us after we'd already done the TV, well, Randy's got a non-refundable family vacation. He can't come. Well, I got this fucking email from Laurinaitis 3 months ago, said he was booked and approved. And Laurinaitis said, oh, he must have forgot. Well, then Tommy Dreamer called up and stooged Laurinaitis, said, actually, John forgot to tell him. That's why he's got the vacation. That was a couple weeks for my final blow up and was one of the main reasons for it. But, you know, they were constantly trying to monkey with what we were doing and constantly trying to tell us what to do with our own company. They wouldn't buy the fucking thing And then one of the last ditch efforts, me and Danny both went to Laurinaitis over the phone and said, look, if you give us a raise from what we're making now from X to Y, whatever it was, then we'll just do whatever the fuck you want us to do. And I meant it because I was so tired of fighting and arguing with them. I said, all right, since we're going to lose a lot of revenue on ticket sales or on whatever the fuck from dumbing this goddamn thing down, which is actually what did happen as soon as I was gone. The booking went south. First, Heyman didn't want to do it, and then Al Snow tried to do it, and I think they had Dreamer in there, botched it up a while. I love you, Tommy, but you're a shitty booker. The money went down. Our money went down. Everything went down because Danny was the last one to be able to argue, so he just started holding them up for more money because he saw the end was near and they were going to fuck him eventually. So the last year and a half, he held them up for a bunch more money because they had no other fucking, thing to do. But we said, we'll do whatever the fuck you want. You give us this raise and it's yours. We'll just do whatever. You know what Laurinaitis did? He came back and gave us a raise that was $250 a week less than what we'd asked for. To save I said, okay. In that case, then you motherfucker, you can't just give us the price we asked for to do whatever the fuck you want and fuck the rest of our business. So fuck you. I'm going to do whatever the fuck I want and take this money as long as possible. And he even had a contract written up that had a clause in it saying Jim Cornette will give first. How the fuck did they phrase it? I have to go back and get that contract and make copies of it. Maybe sell it on the fucking website. But Jim Cornette will give first priority to any WWE affiliated or related business or anything we want to do. He'll give that his first priority. And he put that on paper. And of course I signed it and didn't mean a goddamn word of it because they lied to us. So I was going to lie to them. But anyway, there are all these problems. So with Florida, they started it and made it in Laurinaitis's dream image of a wrestling school. They hired a bunch of great people to do it. Dr. Tom had already been training since the start. He's the guy that trained fucking The Rock in the studio and in the warehouse in Stamford and all those other guys. And so naturally, Doc was a no-brainer. And Dr. Tom's a guy that got significant airtime in this as far as people saying, oh, he was the greatest and blah, blah, blah. And he taught me so much. Guess who's not there anymore? Dr. Tom Pritchard. So they made a baby face out of a guy that they fired unceremoniously. Did I ever tell the story of why they fired Tom Pritchard from the program?
I'm not sure.
They got some guy, and I don't know that I've ever met him yet. Maybe I met him at the Hall of Fame and it went right by me or whatever, but they got a guy from, I think he actually, was he in volleyball, professional volleyball, or is that some woman that they had hired or whatever? Anyway, they got some fucking guy that supposedly had some other sports background in administrating sports named Canyon Seaman. Ceman, but Seaman. You can imagine a guy named Seaman in a wrestling locker room, right? That was fucking beautiful right there.
And you were right. He's a retired beach volleyball player.
There you go. Retired beach volleyball player. He came in his first week and gave all the developmental talent down there a big speech. And as is normal, somebody coming in from outside the business has no idea about anything about wrestling. He came off like he, A, didn't know anything about wrestling, and B, like he was a know-it-all. The quote was a flaming fucking asshole. So Tom, not wanting this guy to get off on the wrong foot, called him in the back, just the two of them, and said, I know you're new, Canyon, but I want to make you aware so that you can do something about it, that you came off to all those guys like an asshole. And he was starting to say, and here's why, and the guy just said, well, I guess we're going to have to agree to disagree. Instead of saying, oh, shit, I did? What the fuck did I do? You know more about this than I do. You've been doing this for 30 years. You know these guys. I'm in a new job. What the fuck? What should I have said? Or where have I gone wrong? He's, well, we're going to agree to disagree. And shortly after that, Dr. Tom was fired because they value people from these real sports with these real degrees more than they do the people that actually know how to do this shit. And that's, like I said, they didn't like Rip Rogers because he was honest with the guys. They didn't like Dr. Tom because he was honest with the office employees. Laurinaitis told me one time, you're yelling at the guys. You think? Yes, I'm yelling at them. I'm a fucking football coach. Well, no, Jim, you need to empower them, because that was a word he had gotten from Vince. You need to empower them and uplift them. No, I need to tell them if they're fucking up that they're fucking up, because they're fucking up my business and they're fucking up the wrestling business. And if they don't want to fuck up the business and they want to get a goddamn job, they need to hear about it. And I don't have time with everything else that I'm doing to fucking pussyfoot around and say, oh, please don't fuck shit up. You fucking lunatic. Here's what you did and here's why. Don't do this anymore. That's the end of it. As long as you don't do it anymore, you've learned something. Didn't mean I wanted to sodomize their mothers and send their whole family to a gas chamber just because I was yelling at them. But there's a lot of yelling going on in wrestling because, as I've mentioned, sometimes shit is done on the fly. You yell when TV is going on. You yell when a live event is going on. You don't have to yell in wrestling school class unless somebody almost kills somebody. Then you yell at them because there's no pressure there. But that was not my thing. The class was Rip's, and the class was Dr. Tom's, and the class was other guys that would come to OVW to fucking help train people. As a matter, when Dr. Tom would come to Louisville, because he'd known Danny Davis for 25 years, instead of getting a hotel room and sitting in a hotel room all by himself, he'd stay at Danny's house. Danny had a big place with plenty of fucking room. Laurinaitis told him, don't stay at Danny Davis's anymore. You're getting too friendly with them. Like, we're not all working for the same fucking people, right? You're too friendly with them. Because it was always a thing with Laurinaitis where he always wanted to take this thing over once he got that job, and he just couldn't do it right. And he still couldn't do it right. Anyway, this documentary, outside of the similarities to OVW, I noticed the guys, they had so many tryout promo and promo class clips where they were actually shooting this shit. If the office wanted to see somebody cut a promo, we would tape them cutting a promo and send it up to them. But I always said, guys do promos on TV. Guys do promos at live events. Guys do pre-tape promos before TV in the fucking locker room. When the shit's going out and going to be seen by somebody, you're on. And that's when you say what you would say if you were really and truly put in the position that you were purported to be in on the program. These guys are just practicing characters. That's another, they kept saying the word character and entertainment. If anybody said character in OVW, I would scream at them and say, if you want to call it a gimmick, it's a gimmick, but it's you from now on. If it's your gimmick, the gimmick becomes you. You're not playing a part. You're not playing a character. They use the word entertainment, even in their promos down there. I mean, Roman Reigns said, I'm going to be the greatest in all of entertainment or whatever. The fuck you. The first motherfucker that said entertainment about the wrestling business would never be on my television again. That's why we trained wrestlers and they trained sports entertainers, and that's what they wanted. The Bellas talking about training for wrestling and how hard it was gives me gas to begin with. But they had a segment on the guys coming up with their names. Coming up with their names. What should their names? We sent in a list of 30 or 40 names. Either use the guy's real name, especially if he's been in the business before and been using it. If he's been in the business before and he had a gimmick, use that gimmick, because you know they're going to change it anyway once they get up there. Or come up with a specific gimmick and a name. You know, for a guy whose name was fucking Chauncey Blubbershit, you don't want to fucking put that on the goddamn program. So, okay, what? You got an idea, or elsewise I'll come up with something for you. But there wasn't like lists of 30 and 40 fucking names. It just, I don't want to be negative on all this whole documentary, but they were training sports entertainers, not wrestlers. They weren't getting guys ready to be in the wrestling business at all. If they didn't make it in the WWE, they didn't give a shit. They didn't care whether the guy went on to anywhere else or not, or was prepared to do anything else. It was WWE way, and that's it. We were training wrestlers that could go anywhere. That's why so many of them did.
What did you think of the one guy they had? I think it may have been during a promo class segment where he kept coming up with different gimmicks, but he did the same promo.
Yeah,
I forget what his name was. Yeah.
And so did everybody else, because you never saw him on TV for that reason. That the promo class stuff, we would do those with training school seminars or with where guys would come in for tryouts. Did it in Ring of Honor, did it in OVW, a variety of places where you give a guy a 1-minute promo. Tell me about yourself, or promo this match that you're about to have, this practice match with this other guy. Just so you could see if they could hit a minute, which almost nobody could. They just peter out at 46 seconds and just stand there and look. Or they would already have some memorized promo of some character that they wanted to play in their minds, and they would it'd be if I said, you're going to have a match with Jim Cornette, the big 6'10" black guy in the corner, or Brian Last, the 5'8" fucking skinny little heel in the corner, or whatever. They'd use the same promo and just interchange names. That's what guys that would come, because even the guys in seminars and tryouts like that, even a Ring of Honor, whatever, they thought they were supposed to be playing a part. One guy in a Ring of Honor tryout actually started his promo that he was a space alien and he had landed on Earth from whatever the fuck. And after 15 seconds, I said, whoa. I said, go outside, go to the back of the promo line, and when you come back in this room, you're a fucking Earthling. I don't know whatever happened to that guy. But anyway.
He ended up training Chris Statlander.
Well, there you go. And I would critique guys' promos, whether they did them in OVW for television or for the live events, or, in these seminars, but practicing in an empty building, coming up with different lines for a character is just goofy. Nobody ever told me, come up with a character. They said, here, you're a rich kid. You're a rich kid. Your mother bought your way into the business. What would you say in that situation? Okay, I'll take it from there. I'll practice my promos in the hotel rooms, in the car. I'll come up with shit to say. I'll get it over. They talk about Dusty Rhodes being the promo king, and he was running the promo classes. And even several of them said we would say whatever. And he kept saying, but who are you? Tell me about yourself. Why do I care? He wanted them to talk about themselves and be real and be from the heart while they're trying to do all this fucking horseshit emoting. And, some of them got it and some of them didn't, apparently. But, that's the thing, is Dusty was saying, you be you, baby. And then somebody would talk about their character. All the clips of the funny characters and the funny outfits, I don't know what that, guys were wearing fake mustaches and doing all that. That's another exercise they used to have. That's why Paul Heyman flunked his first tryout for the WWF. Back in, my God, it would have been
89.
89 right before he came to the WWF, or to WCW rather.
Oh, I was thinking it was after Flair sent him home in the spring of 89.
No, I thought it was.
I thought it was before.
Well, it may have been, but yeah, the fucking ponytail and the fucking grabbing it thing and the fucking they used to, in the WWF, they would have guys come in, whether it be announcers or wrestlers or whatever, and they wouldn't let them cut promos or act like a wrestling announcer. They would have them do exercises where they would hand somebody a light bulb and they'd say, sell me this light bulb. And then they'd turn the camera on and you're supposed to sell them the light bulb, because that was supposed to see whether you were quick and could think on your feet and you were glib and whatever. It was fucking stupid. It was like an acting class fucking exercise. And with Heyman, since he had that ponytail back then, they had him doing some kind of thing where he grabbed his fucking ponytail and held it up over his head and was supposed to go woo, woo, woo a lot or whatever. And he was like, what the fuck is this? I heard the whole story was goddamn insane, but that was 25 years ago. But anyway, they did the clips of the guys, funny characters and funny outfits. We never did that. If it didn't lead to something we could do on television to get a guy over and sell a fucking ticket, it would not happen. I didn't have guys do in-character promos. I put them in specific situations. I gave them ideas of what they would say if they were really in that situation. And I said, put that in your own words. And that's it. You can't teach somebody how to fucking be an interesting speaker. They either are or they aren't. It comes out eventually or it doesn't. As a matter of fact, Bray Wyatt, obviously, on this documentary was 2 levels above all the other guys in the whole fucking place doing promos even then. Because he had the Blackjack Mulligan genes, I guess. But, you know, one time somebody told me while Dusty was down there one day, he was just shaking his head. He said, Vince better be glad I never saved my money. But I can imagine he had to go out of his mind. Because when I worked with Dusty, he didn't critique your promos. He told me, don't talk about the Challenger kid. But he didn't critique promos because everybody was working for him either already knew how to do promos as themselves, or he just didn't let them talk on TV. But so they stole the ring crew idea from OVW, where the guys put the ring up and took it down, although I don't know whether they didn't specify this, but our rule was the heels put the ring up and the baby faces take it down, or vice versa. Heels and baby faces were never allowed to mingle in front of the people. Yes, you would go and you would see the stars of the show putting the ring up because it was a training promotion, but you wouldn't see the heels and the baby faces putting the ring up together and then going out and wrestling. That didn't happen. And a lot of times, whose ever turn it was to be last afterwards was hot at the other group because they could get out early. They talked about making the guys poster the towns. We never did that because we actually had local sponsors for our spot shows. And the local sponsors were supposed to poster the town. Whether they did it well or not all the time was subject to debate. But that was another thing when I was looking at some of their schedules. These guys in Florida, they couldn't. It's not set up the same in Orlando and in Tampa and in Middle Florida as the Louisville area was. We ran 150 live events a year with television tapings, practice shows, Six Flags, whatever the case, and never went farther than 120 miles from Louisville, Kentucky. Those guys were going to these fucking dipshit National Guard armories in Florida in the middle of nowhere, a ways away from fucking Tampa, and having to poster the towns and then come back and then go back down to wrestle them. So that was probably tough. They spent very little time talking about the FCW TV, and it looked good. The clips that I saw, it looked like, because they spent money and they got equipment down there because they were opened up to spend money at that point because Laurinaitis had to make it work. It was his idea. But they didn't say really anything about that. They didn't show any. They just showed a few clips. They didn't show any great matches or highlights. And to be honest, that started me thinking, do you ever remember a great FCW television show like you remember great OVW TV shows? Do you remember any major FCW events like the Rock and Rumble or the fucking Christmas Chaos or the any of the big events, the Six Flags events that we ran in OVW, or the Last Dance where we closed the gardens down? No, because they didn't have any. Because they were put in a position where they were at a place where they could not draw big crowds and they didn't have any buildings they could afford. And I mentioned the WWE didn't want the TV to be seen. They got upset at us a bunch when we got a VHS deal one time. It's going to be like $750 a month to sell our VHSs of the shows. Oh, we don't want you to do that. We don't, because it was with Feinstein. We don't like Rob Feinstein. Well, we like his $750 a month. So they started paying us $750 a month not to sell our VHSs to Rob Feinstein.
I'll agree with them on that.
Well, I was running a business though. Then we got a deal to get on one of the satellite networks. Like Bill Barron's got Smoky Mountain on America One or whatever. They didn't want that. They didn't want people to see it. I said, well, we can get this revenue. So they started paying us a little more not to do this deal. And finally, I got a foreign TV deal that it would have panned out in the short run. It didn't last in the long term. The people involved in it didn't last in the long term, but we could have made several $1,000s at minimum. And they didn't want us to do that, but they wouldn't pay us the fucking money they were telling us to turn down. So that's what that was one of the times I got hot. And that was after JR was already weaning his way out of it, so he couldn't really intervene. But they would actually pay us not to take money from other people on shit that didn't matter, didn't make any difference to them. But the FCW did the weekly TV tapings, $5 tickets. Kern's family ran the concessions, just like Danny's wife, Julie, ran the concessions. I noticed that the WWE was putting their copyright on because they did show a close of the FCW TV show, and it said copyright FCW and WWE. Diver explained the story of how that they tried to tell us they owned our TV show and we told them they didn't.
I don't think so.
Well, when things were getting really sideways, and we had, I believe the way it came up was we had another offer to do something else with our TV show after we got in the new Davis Arena and the TV started really looking good, not the old building. The old building looked like shit. But the new arena that Al Snow and OVW is still in today, they've done almost 1,100 television shows since 1993 when Danny started it. That one looked good, and the TV started looking better, and we had some deal, and that's when Laura and I just said, well, you know we own the TV. Me and Danny both said, what? Yeah, look at the original contract. I said, we have. Doesn't say anything about our TV show. Since we were the first developmental program, because we invented it, we had the idea, and I had the idea. I sold Jim Ross on it. He sold Vince on it, and I moved to Louisville. That was my escape. They had never written a contract for a developmental territory. So the verbiage that they put in was that they would own the videotapes of all their contracted talent. I said, all right, then we'll be glad to send you the videotapes of all your contracted talent. But since the television show contains non-contract talent, both wrestlers, referees, announcers, Dean Hill, and all sorts of people like that, then you'll have to either give all those people contracts or elsewise you'll have to buy our fucking television library. So they did. They bought the fucking TV library to clear that little obstacle up, which at that point was about 5 years of television, so it was a nice little low six-figure sum. But they tried to fucking act like that they owned OVW television. And Danny said, I never agreed to sign my television show that I was running for fucking 6 years before you people showed up away to you. But anyway, so they kept the rights of Florida Championship Wrestling. John Laurinaitis told another story. Our job was to develop talent as fast as we could and get them on television. That was another problem. They were sending guys saying in 3 months, well, what about so-and-so? Yeah, we've talked about all, especially all the young guys that they signed that were 18, 19. We'd say they'll be all right. Couple of years. Maybe they're legally able to vote. Oh no, we got to move these guys along. What the fuck? You think you're going to train a fucking wrestler to wrestle in the WWF, the biggest promotion in the world, in 6 fucking months? What kind of idiot are you? We found out what kind of idiot he was. That began the fucking the phase they went through of bringing up guys that were completely and totally unprepared for what they were doing because they rushed them through the thing. I was fine with them having multiple developmental territories. They fucked Les Thatcher around in Cincinnati, but that was early on. He never really got a chance to get a great facility and get going, and they gave him all the WCW rejects that they didn't want to begin with. Deep South was a fiasco. It got universally panned because it was just a goddamn lunatic asylum. You know, it just was run like a shit show, and they couldn't get on TV in Atlanta either. It's just that's where Jody Hamilton lived, and Jody tried, but it just didn't work. But I had encouraged them to get developmental programs in different parts of the country So you could send one to Louisville for 6 months, then to Florida for 6 months, then to fucking Kansas City or wherever for 6 months. And in a couple of years, you'd have a guy that's really polished, that had been able to go from prelims to main events, had been a babyface and a heel, had done different angles to know how they worked, gotten their timing. That's the way you train guys to be wrestlers. You don't go from a fucking schoolyard basketball game on the playground to the NBA. There's got to be in between. That's why they worked all the guys in FCW like they were all on the same level. I brought guys in and started them out in the opening matches and let them mature and develop in front of the people and let them get over with the people and move them up the cards. That way, when they took our main event guys, then the theory was we'd have guys ready to go in the main events. The problem was, for a while there, thanks to Laurinaitis, they were taking all of our middle card guys and not the guys that could really fucking go, the Bashams, the Dinsmores, the Conways, the Novas, the fucking on and on and on, the Jeters, Mark Magnus, all those guys. They would take the guys that Laurinaitis felt reminded him of himself, like fucking Mark Jindrak, who had no body, no personality, 2 left feet, but he was big and tall. Or Sean O'Hare, that was a discipline problem, looked great, but couldn't talk and couldn't fucking work and loved to get in bar fights and cause trouble with cops. So that was telling on the documentary. Said we wanted to get him as fast as we could because that made him look better in the office when he could tell Vince, oh yeah, we got 6 more up. Well, they 6 more wasn't ready. Seth Rollins, Tyler Black talked about not getting called up when he was clearly better than everybody else down there, and he was frustrated. And they made it in this sound like it was his fault. I'd talked to Tom while he was still down there. So what the fuck? Why is Tyler Black still in developmental when he's better than half the guys on the main roster? He said he won't quit doing what they don't want him to do. And it was all the little things that, you can imagine that a guy who's had a wrestling background would do that they didn't want in sports entertainment. And so once he started doing those things, then they brought him up, but they just had to have it. Oh, we got to wipe the wrestler off of him. But Kern worked his ass off and he knew how the wrestling business worked. He was glad to have that chance to do something like that and run a school for the WWE. I never intended to only be a school for the WWE. I intended OVW to be what it was, a local promotion that drew big crowds for its big events and drew small crowds for its training events and medium-sized crowds. We might have 62 people on Tuesday night at St. Therese Gym in downtown Louisville for a practice show where nobody still ever broke character and nobody still ever fucking did the same thing twice. And we'd have 200 or 300 or maybe 500 for a high school gym spot show, and we'd have 1,000 or 2,000, depending on our attraction for Six Flags. And we, as I've mentioned, for the 3 big events at the Gardens before they closed it, we sold 12,000 tickets for 3 events, grossed $150,000. We had an opportunity to get on broadcast television, which they couldn't do. I wanted OVW to provide a training service for the WWE and make extra money that way and get these guys ready for the big leagues. But also we were running our own promotion and profiting or not profiting based on that. They spend more money now on one developmental guy's contract than they had wrapped up in OVW for a year. We made all the rest of our money through partnering with Clear Channel Radio for the big events and co-promotion with Six Flags and sponsors, large and small, from the satellite store to the, local yokel fucking furniture shop and the pizza place. So the FCW, and it was a good program, but they tried to stretch this out to an hour and 20 minutes with a lot of talking heads, but it was a wrestling school that ran shows in armories in front of a few people. They didn't do major TV specials. They didn't draw big crowds. They couldn't run big buildings to draw the big crowds. And I don't know, truthfully, what their record crowd was, but I never heard of them drawing anything over 500 people. Did you?
No.
So for what they wanted, good or bad or indifferent, is what they got. But this was not a wrestling promotion. It was a school that ran shows. And that's what they wanted. And that's what I did not want OVW to just be that. And that's why we couldn't get along. You know, JR was fine, but once Laurinaitis came along, but then in poetic justice, here comes the son-in-law who wants to take it all over and shuts that shit down. And now they've got tens of millions of dollars to spend on a wrestling school, and their fucking performance center has a kitchen. So the same poetic justice, the same thing happened to Laurinaitis as he did to us. He shut it down to recreate it in his own image, and then Triple H did the same thing to him. And now they make no bones about even being a training promotion. They're the next promotion. You see what I did there? Next. So I don't mean to piss and moan about this show. As a documentary on a wrestling school, you know, it was great. It's just they had more footage and they can take more credit for this because they own everything. But it was basically OVW light with the ideas that some of the good ideas that we had about how to run a wrestling school, and none of the good ideas that we had about how to run a promotion.
It's impossible to watch that thing and not go, why isn't Tom Pritchard there?
Well, yeah, because he's a fucking wrestler that told other wrestlers the truth and told other office people the truth and not being a prick about it, trying to help them. Canyon Seaman, Oprah, Uma, Seaman.
Do you end up feeling bad for Steve Kern, the way things ended up watching that?
Well, yeah, kind of, but not really, because, you know, he wasn't running a promotion beforehand, and he didn't run a promotion afterwards, and he never had to move out of his hometown. I felt worse for Danny when they fucked him, and I've told that story before. He knew it was coming after they ran me off, and that's why I said, he asked me one time when Laurinaitis would make these calls on Wednesdays. He said, they're trying to run you off, right? I said, apparently, because Laurinaitis knew if he fucking pushed me long enough, I'd blow up, and I did. And then he thought he'd have a better chance of getting Danny to do what he wanted him to do. But then once that I was gone and fucking OVW's bottom line was not looking as good as it did because the ticket sales went down and the booking wasn't as good and the TV was ratings, blah, 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 the whole 9 yards, he started jacking more money out of them because now he's got to run this fucking lunatic asylum practically by himself with only outside help that he can't trust because they all work for the WWE first and foremost, and he can't even have his old friend Tom Pritchard stay at his house. So that's when Laurinaitis started trying to figure out a way I can't take this thing over, so I'll just do my own with somebody that'll be more complacent about it. So yeah, Steve did, and you know, I mean, Steve should have known. You do everything that, you know, you try to do everything that makes any sense that they ask you to do. And the most important part was we turned out the biggest money stars that they fucking had in the last 20 years. And everybody that came from OVW could work. And everybody that came from OVW could talk and could hit TV cues and knew how to work television. And everybody that came from OVW had been in front of crowds of 60 people, 100 people, 500 people, 1,000 people, 4,000 people, whatever the fuck. Everybody was prepared. That's why some guys, when they didn't make it in WWE, they just went on somewhere else. And they've been all over all these promotions because we tried to train well-rounded wrestlers. Kern could do that, and he worked his ass off to do it, but he should have known that ultimately they were going to fuck him too because they fucked us. It's like when Brian Lee was the underfaker. And he went to Vince and he said, you know, I could start anytime full-time, Vince. And Vince said, aren't you working for Cornette down in Smoky Mountain? Yeah, but I can start anytime. So what's the first thing that happened? Vince came to me and said, hey, Brian Lee says he can start at any time. I just wanted you to know that. You know, I'm not going to take him until you tell me you're finished with him. But I just wanted you to know that because I figure if he'll do it to you, he'll do it to me when he gets a better offer from somebody else. So Brian Lee may not even have known this, but I told Vince, I said, you know what? Since he said that, you can have him anytime you want him, because I've had him for way too long anyway. And then Vince didn't want him after the Underfaker thing fell apart, and I had to take him back and worm him back into the fucking cards. But Kern should have known, because if they fucked us, they're going to fuck him. The point was that we had turned out guys that knew what the fuck they were doing, and we had an unparalleled record at it by doing it the way that we did it. And the only person that ever complained was the one that turned out to be the best friends with the fucking son-in-law, the fucking overaged, injury-prone, non-personality fucking mug that I made the Demon of the Deep Leviathan. And Brock Lesnar, who just wanted to go back to Minnesota. That's the only two that ever complained. And even Brock was still close with Danny Davis as of a couple of years ago. Came by and visited him.
You know, you bring that up. OVW obviously turned out a generation of stars from Cena down to Lesnar. FCW, from watching this documentary.
And also, can you imagine if they'd actually used the guys that we trained that were actually better performers than some of the ones they used, instead of fucking burying them with bad booking or just fucking running them off?
Used is right. They used them. They used them up.
Yeah.
FCW, clearly from watching this, although some people had an independent pedigree beforehand, a lot of the top stars of today went through the FCW program. Charlotte, Seth Rollins, Jon Moxley, Roman Reigns, Bray Wyatt.
Dr. Tom.
Well, Dr. Tom was the trainer, yeah. But what's the record of NXT in terms of NXT actually developing new stars? Not the people that were in NXT that came from FCW, that came from Dr. Tom and Steve Kern.
Not a fair question to ask me, because I've only been watching NXT since we started this little fucking review fiasco. So I don't know the answer to that question.
Like, you can't give NXT credit for Adam Cole and Roderick Strong, right?
Well, of course not. What the fuck? No, from scratch? I don't know from scratch. They keep trying to go for football players and these supposed real sports athletes, and they bring them and show them this big-time performance center and tell them they're going to pay them to train, and just on the theory they might be good. So who's going to turn that down, even if you don't give a shit about being a wrestler? Well, I'll take a fling at this and see. When you had places that were rooted in the wrestling business, they don't need to be fucking air-conditioned. They don't need to be, we talked about the Big Show bucket when they sent the Big Show down to the old Davis Arena in Jeffersonville to lose some weight and get in shape. We gave him his own puke bucket, because in the summertime when he was having to hit the ropes, he'd have to stop and go outside and puke and then come back in and do it again. Then he hit the ropes so hard he bent the fucking ring posts, so they bought us a new ring. But it can't be, we're going to cater to you. We're going to give you enough money to live on and pay all your bills and have no financial worries while you train to do something that you may or may not be any good at in this beautiful facility. No, you need to get in the back of the fucking car and drive to the goddamn National Guard Armory. That was FCW. That was wrestling. You need to work in a hot building. You need to train in a fucking hot building or a cold building. You need to get the idea of what the wrestling business is, and you need to want to be good at it and want to stay in it and want to excel, or we're all just wasting our time. And they, early on in OVW, they signed a couple of guys. What was that? Stephen Gamblin. He had been an NFL player of some description, and he was 6'7" and 325 pounds. And goddamn, he didn't last long. And boy, you should have seen also. I'll tell this story. Goddamn it, I might as well. Danny won't get mad at me. Danny Davis had an adult daughter. She was over the age of consent of 18, but he didn't like her going out with the wrestlers for obvious reasons. Well, this fucking big Stephen Gamblin character hadn't been here 6 weeks, and he takes Danny Davis's daughter out on a date and keeps her out late enough that eyebrows were raised. Even though she was an adult, I believe at the time she was living with Danny. And the next day at fucking TV, Stephen pulls up, and a lot of these guys, I think Russ McCullough came here in some kind of fucking Hummer. that Occam Albrecht Brackus, he had a nice car. The guys that they would sign to developmental contracts had been other places. They had these big cars, and here the real wrestlers are coming up in shit you had to fucking fix with super glue and a rubber band, right? Stephen Gamlin pulls up and gets out of his car, and somebody alerted Danny was there. And Danny came out back, and Danny, 5'6" and 210 pounds then, stuck his finger in that 6'7" monster's face and said, "Motherfucker, you keep my daughter out to whatever fucking time it was again, I will pull your eyeballs out and skull fuck you in front of all the rest of these motherfuckers. Give me a try if you don't think I will." And old Stephen gulped and stood there and took his tongue lashing, and he got cussed until Danny got tired of it. And what would have happened if he had not taken that tongue lashing was that Danny would have pulled his fucking eyeballs out and skull fucked him. Because here you had a guy that actually trained on Herb Welch's farm. Danny Davis trained and broke into business, and he's been on the show, and you can go back in the archives or on YouTube. I'm sure it's there somewhere. He was trained by one of the guys that invented the fucking Southern wrestling business, that fought in carnivals, was a salty old fucking shooter, and this fucking football player would have had his testicles in his fucking ears before he knew it. And he knew that. He knew enough about Danny's reputation to know that that's what would happen, which is why he took his tongue lashing. But you went from guys who were literally trained by the first generation of pros that came from carnivals to guys that are being trained that they're actors and entertainers and not pro wrestlers and even pro athletes in a goddamn 10-year span. And that's why all the guys now, sometimes you can't fault them, even though I do. The guys that are in the wrestling business now think that this, what they see now, this is what it's always been and the way it's supposed to be. Or that somehow it used to be horrible, but now it's so much better. Because they don't know any different. Because especially the WWE and everybody involved with it has tried to build a wall around its current talent and anything that could rub off on them from the real wrestling business. And it's that's why it's a lost art.
You think we'll ever see an OVW documentary on the WWE Network?
I doubt it. Well, for one thing, they own the TVs. They own the TVs during the period of time that OVW had a developmental program with them, which was 99 through 07. And you'll probably never see anything more than clips. Even that was, by the way, I think everybody knows this, and I think you'll concur with it. That's the best booking I ever did. My OVW booking was so far above what I did in Smoky Mountain. In Smoky Mountain, I had veterans that could take matters in their own hands. But in OVW, my booking was 3 times better than anything else I've ever done anywhere else. And that's what kept me going. When I would want to quit the WWE, which I did on a number of occasions, especially the last year and a half, I couldn't figure out a way to quit the WWE without quitting OVW because we had gotten so entangled. And that's why they couldn't figure out a way to get out of OVW until they just made their own from scratch because they were too entangled. So it was a very abusive relationship. But I don't know what they could come up with to use as visual support like they do, because FCW, apparently they had a camera on everything. The wrestling school classes, Danny would turn the hard camera on and let it run and put it on VHS while a class was going on. Send if they wanted to see it at the office, he could send it to them. Most time, the office didn't know what the fuck we were doing. They got mad at Bruce one time, and he didn't have enough to do, so they had him. They said, okay, your task is to watch the OVW TV each week and give us a report on it and see who's ready to come up. Well, of course, he didn't want to, so he'd write a line or two. I saw a couple of them. We're not supposed to, but I saw a couple of them. He'd write a line or two about each match or segment without going into any detail, not talking about this guy's a better heel than a babyface, or this guy seems to be picking it up, talking, or whatever, anything instructive. He would generally say something that he thought that I'm pretty sure Laurinaitis would agree with. Either that or he just demented like Laurinaitis was, because he'd say stupid shit about the best talent we had and then praise the guys they were going to bring up anyway. And And he couldn't get the idea that we were not following strict WWE protocol. Well, on our show, JR is only an announcer. But in OVW, he's presented as someone of authority in the WWE. That's because the WWE was saying publicly that he was vice president of talent relations. So when we would have him come down and make appearances, it was generally to reward one of our top wrestlers, whether they already had a developmental contract or not. We didn't want to just say that 30 of these guys have a contract. We wanted to make it special. So we would have JR come down sometimes and actually announce that they were signing them to a contract to move them to the next level or to make a different match or to whatever the fuck. And that's why I made Laurinaitis. The only time Laurinaitis as a performer has ever had heat in his life as a heel, he had plenty of heat as one of the dynamic dudes. People hated him. But as a heel, the only time he's ever had heat as a performer was when to figure out some reason to explain to the fans why all their favorite wrestlers would go to the main roster and be made to look like idiots, Nick Dinsmore or Matt Morgan or whatever. I said it was the evil John Laurinaitis that's now working against our beloved Jim Ross in the office. And I even said one time, I said, Doug Basham, Machine, had sent his cohort Nikita up to engage in a dalliance with John Laurinaitis, which is why that they were persecuting the Damager and calling him Danny Basham. So basically, Nikita fucked John Laurinaitis to get ahead. And Laurinaitis had no idea this shit was going on. So he says, he comes down for our 2-hour special. We did a 2-hour primetime special on the WB affiliate here leading up to one of our big events. And I said, John, would you mind having a short tag match with you and Luther Reigns, who they sent, poor fella. He's had health issues since then. But we called him Laurinaitis as Inspector Impact. That was kind of a little play on words, too. That he was going to come down and make sure that Laurinaitis' bidding was going to be followed. So I put Laurinaitis and Inspector Impact in a tag match with two of our baby faces. Laurinaitis says, I don't have trunks anymore. I said, just come out in fucking sweats. It doesn't matter. Just you'll be in it. He came out. The people fucking booed. They threw shit at him. They were cussing him. They hated him because he was the reason why all their favorite wrestlers on OVW TV would be sent to Raw or SmackDown and look like fucking idiots and be made fun of. Johnny Jeter and Mike Mondo, all those guys. He had fucking heat. I could get anybody over at that point. We had the people in Louisville educated to our product and our style. They knew all the fucking guys. They knew their backstories. They knew who they were mad at. They knew who they were friends with. They knew their goals and what they were trying to do. And they reacted to everything because we spent the time to educate them. This is our formula. We present old school wrestling with new school talent. Logic of the 80s with guys that were born in the 80s. That wasn't so, I was only 20 years beforehand at that point in time. Everybody got fucking new music. I even had Stacy be my music fucking consultant. And everybody's music, because we could play commercial music, because who gives a fuck? It's Louisville. Nobody did it in Smoky Mountain. Nobody complained. So we would have their music fit their gimmick, their personality, what they wanted to accomplish. And I would tell them, I'd take that fucking song and play it over in your head. This is your vibe when you come out. Get with it, right? Everything had to fit because you know how obsessive I am. Any loophole in logic needed to be closed up. And especially when they started doing really stupid shit with the guys on Raw or SmackDown. Danny Davis used to call me the Weasel, because I would figure out a way to weasel out of whatever corner they had backed me up in with the way they were presenting our guys so that it wouldn't look phony in Louisville. Because my face was on that show. People knew I was the matchmaker. I was the play-by-play guy. It's my hometown. I'm out there talking to these people all the time. I was not going to have phony fucking wrestling presented in the city of Louisville, Kentucky. And for a period of about 6 years, we didn't. And, you know, they couldn't stand it that we were autonomous or independent or whatever else. They couldn't get away from us because they had nobody else that could do it until, like I said, Laurinaitis built part of what we were doing in Florida so we could have more control over it. But then they lost the guys getting the full rounded background by being specifically booked as underneath guys or middle guys or main event guys, or being able to work in front of large crowds, being able to do television specials, being able to be featured in local commercials. They took that part of it out because they didn't want a wrestling promotion to exist on its own. They wanted a school that they could not own, but control. So they got that part of it.
Well, your first experiment with the WWE Network. Have you given up?
I mean, I like, no, there's plenty of stuff on there. And I like the show it's so funny that it was like, we suddenly thought of to do this. Yeah. From coming up and seeing what we've been doing for the previous 10 fucking years. And you said, do you ever think there'll be an OVW documentary? We don't have a lot of that shit on tape, but we never had anybody taking pictures at our workouts. The public was never allowed to see a training session. We didn't take pictures of guys being taught how to work because that would expose the business. We ran a fucking, one VCR just in case anybody wanted to go back and look, but you learned by doing. And as Dr. Tom said in the FCW documentary, by repetition over and over till it becomes second nature. Not only that applies to the moves in the ring, but that also applies to the way you think about the business. My guys always kayfabed in public. If they didn't, and we found out about it, they got fined. My guys never said entertainer or entertainment. They said wrestler or sport. My guys never used inside terminology on television. There was nothing. Every once in a while, something may drop or something may get through, but I supervised the post-production. Danny pushed the buttons, and I said, nah, we can't have that. So there's a lot of that stuff that just doesn't exist because we specifically did not record a lot of that stuff, because why are you going to record guys practicing? You don't do that because then you can see through it. If anybody was to see it, you record and watch it back with them, say, don't do this anymore, and then dump that fucking tape. We saved the one where Randy Orton admitted he hated wrestling, but that was a special case. But yeah, there's just, and they've already done then they'd have to go back and say, well, this other documentary, we kind of made up a lot of that shit because they'd been doing it up there for 10 years beforehand. So they're not going to do that. And they still do not own all of the OVW library. So that is now rests with Al Snow, since Danny Davis is firmly in retirement in Florida and don't give a fuck about wrestling. I felt bad for Danny. The last 3 years or so, I'd go over there every once in a while to visit him. See, after Laurinaitis we had the final blow up, and Laurinaitis says, well, how's this going to work? I said, well, you can't fire me from OVW because I own part of it. You can fire me from my consultant's position with the WWF. That's fine. But I will step aside because I didn't want, Danny was getting a check from the WWF, and also OVW as an entity was getting a check at that time. Well, if OVW was getting a check from the WWF, I was going to get part of that money because I still own part of it. So I didn't want to run them all off. It cost Danny his check. I said, I'll just step back and let you do whatever the fuck it is that you do, Laurinaitis. I said, as long as you do not devalue my percentage of Ohio Valley Wrestling. Well, that happened over the next year and a half. Like I said, Heyman didn't care whether we sold any tickets. He didn't give a fuck about the spot shows. He just wanted to get out of there. He wanted to get a couple of guys up on the main roster so that he could look good in the office and they'd get him out of Louisville. The only reason he stayed long in Louisville on Tuesday nights was so he could purposely miss his plane and wouldn't have to go to Deep South on Wednesday because that thing was an abomination. And then the various other people they tried, it didn't work. So that's when, and I've told the story, Danny and I concocted a way that they might think that I had lost my ever-loving mind. And since I was on camera for TNA, their only competitor at that point, they wanted to get me out of it anyway. So they advanced Danny the money to buy me out. Then I kicked him back a nice little finder's fee out of that, which was still in 5 figures. And then they started making their plans to get the fuck out and do their own thing. And Danny started getting as much money as he could out of them until they did fuck him. And then we've told a story before, but just in the interest of completion here real quick as we're winding up, they gave him no notice in 2007. They had told him, re-signed the lease on the building for 3 years in 2000, I believe. Well, in 2006, the most recent contract we had signed with them was coming up. So they said, oh, yeah, we're fine. Sign the lease on the building. It's in Danny's name. He'd be responsible. Redo the deal with the TV station. Everything's fine. 6 months later, they come to him and said, we're giving you 2 weeks notice. We're going to move everything to Florida. It's like, what the fuck? And that would have been the majority of the crew. As a matter of fact, one time in 2006, anticipating this, we actually trademarked and filed papers and opened Derby City Wrestling, which was going to be a subsidiary to OVW, because we figured if they find a way to snatch OVW, we'll have another wrestling promotion ready to go on in Louisville. And we were discussing with the television station, we did a few TV shows. We're discussing with the station a 2-hour block, 1 hour of OVW and 1 hour of Derby City. But that didn't come to pass because we couldn't get it ready in time. Anyway, we were making backup plans. When I'd stepped back in 2005, I was still part owner of the company. I went out and started selling sponsorships and started trying to get some revenue in. The big Wix Pizza thing, where we were getting, a few $1,000s a month, plus all the pizza we could sell and our guys in commercials and some other things like that. But as fast as I could make the money another way, our shows and our ticket sales and everything was falling off. And the only thing that was really still a major deal was the Six Flags deal. Well, it was coming up on Six Flags season. Danny had sold him another package for high 5 figures for the summer to have shows every Friday night out at their amphitheater. And in one fell swoop, Laurinaitis would have come in, and if he'd taken all the guys from Florida, or taken all the guys to Florida, it would have killed Danny's Six Flags deal, which was what was going to keep him afloat for the next few years. Until Six Flags cut the girl's leg off in the fucking, unrepaired ride, and they all got closed down. Stephen P. New should have got a hold of that one. Anyway, John Cena went to fucking Vince McMahon and said, this guy has done everything you wanted him to do, and he trained all of us, and you can't fucking fuck him like this. And got Vince to agree to send the WWE talent for the Six Flags deal through that summer, and John was one of them that came. And that's when they drew their biggest crowd that year, even in the rain, to see John Cena. So if it hadn't been for him being a stand-up guy, Laurinaitis would have fucked Danny Davis. Where I was going with this was, once that they had bought me out, then they fucked Danny, then Danny owned the whole thing. Then later on, that's when he had gone through deals with TNA, and we did some Ring of Honor co-promotions when Ring of Honor was first starting its television tapings, because we needed a place to tape. But the last few years, even though he scaled back on the scale of the operations, they weren't running any Six Flags event. There was no more Six Flags. Weren't running the Gardens. Gardens was closed. It was just spot shows and the TV. He got a dedicated group of local guys that most of them weren't going to go anywhere, but they liked being in the wrestling business, and they found a steady group of fans that were into their programs, even though some of it was quite brutal to watch. The fans came and supported them, and Danny still made money. That's one thing. Danny Davis never, over the long period of time, ever lost money in the wrestling business. I've said he was a business genius. I saw him make a $3 profit on a $103 gate one night. He's the one that kept us in business and kept himself in business all that time. No matter what, he was a genius at that, and he could squeeze a nickel till the buffalo farted. But finally, over the last few years he was there, I'd go to visit him, and I'd go in his office, and he'd close the door, and the monitor that sat on his desk that showed the TV taping, he'd never turn it on. I'd say, Danny, you going to watch the show? He said, no, I come in, I do the paperwork, make sure the commission's happy, make sure the bills are paid. These guys, they're selling enough tickets to keep the doors open, but I can't watch it, or I'd hit the ring and beat the fuck out of everybody and lock the doors tomorrow morning. So for the last few years, he just didn't watch what wrestling had become, the entertainment and the bullshit. And finally, he decided, all right, I've loved this. It's been my my child, but I'm ready. And Al Snow has a partner and thought he could do something with it, which he has done in the year and a half since he bought the thing from Danny. Until recently, they started doing their TV show live. They're not on as big a station in Louisville as we were at that time, but they're on a station that not only has a broadcast signal, but cable coverage. And they started doing live tapings. And they did the 4th Street live show for the 1000th television program and had a great crowd down there. And they've got some local sponsors. And they were about to go live on one of those America One type networks just when this whole thing hit. So that's been put on hold, but it's not as big as it once was. They don't have access to the talent that we once had, but they're still keeping wrestling alive in Louisville. And OVW now, I think Danny's TV started right after Raw did. But OVW and the WWE now are the 2 longest running uninterrupted promotions and television products in America. And at one point from, 1999 until, 1999 until I left in 2005, and I think it was still another year or so. OVW, besides the WWE, was the only profitable full-time wrestling promotion with weekly television and running a full schedule of events in the United States. Ring of Honor wasn't making any money. I don't say any money. Ring of Honor was not turning a profit. TNA was not turning a profit. And practically nobody else even had a full-time schedule to speak of any event, and certainly didn't have broadcast television. So Danny Davis's name, I think, gets mentioned twice in this show, and once out of Laurinaitis's chicken lips. But he's the reason why. I'm the reason why a developmental program got started. He's the reason why the developmental program made money, regardless of whether it was affiliated with the WWE or not.
One last question for you, because we've gone, I thought last week's episode was long. I think we beat that record.
Well, fuck, nobody's got anything else to do. And besides that, I've just stopped giving a complete fuck and don't care whether anybody hears some of these stories now or not. I will find the note that I wrote and fax to Danny Davis so that he could send to the fucking office in Stamford when he had convinced them. He said, my fucking crazy ex-partner is a lunatic and is going to cause us all a bunch of problems unless I've got the money to buy him out. I started writing in longhand on both sides of the paper, and by the time I got to page 4, I was using 2 or 3 lines. It looked like a goddamn ransom note. I'll tell everything I know, and I'll make up the shit I don't if I don't get out of this shit. And they sent that fucking money down, and I got my money, and Danny got his. We worked a Memphis program on him.
Well, that could be your restraining order for 2020. I have a feeling a lot of people would love to have a copy of that. But watching the FCW documentary, at any point did you think, when you're watching Seth Rollins, I'm responsible for him being there? Because you're the one who talked him out of going to TNA.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but then I felt bad because I sent him to a place they kept him for 2 fucking years. It's like keeping fucking Picasso in 3rd grade art class. But until he stopped doing the things that they identified with indie wrestling, and I mean, there's plenty of things with indie wrestling that should never be seen in public. But Tyler Black wasn't doing very many of them. So I don't know what the fucking problem even was. But for a while I felt bad. I was like, fuck, I fucking said, just please don't go to TNA. Please ask for a call, make another call, do anything. And it was a delay of a week or 10 days or whatever till they called him back. But then when they sent him to Florida for the next couple of years, I was like, oh, fuck, what did I do? But then it's worked out well. But yes.
Okay. What are you going to watch next on the network?
Well, why don't we leave that up to the people? Why don't we? And you teased this past week on Twitter and said, what would you like Jim to watch? And they came up with everything from Sputnik Monroe's circumcision to fucking every single episode of fucking, the Saturday night TBS show from 1986 or whatever. Why don't you put out one of those polls and give people maybe a classic show or a more recent show or a documentary or something else to choose from, specific things to choose from. And if they vote for whatever they vote for, we'll do that for next week's experience, along with potentially AEW. If I'm turning the TV off anytime anybody teleports anywhere, anytime anybody, anything to do with any invisible fucking wrestlers, I'm turning the goddamn television off. I won't watch any further. I don't expect to be told that I'm a fucking complete idiot and I'm so starved for entertainment of any kind or such a fucking buffoon that I will believe that a motherfucker is teleporting across the building or wrestling the Invisible Man. So otherwise than that, anything that doesn't involve any invisible people, I'm willing to critique, but as soon as somebody is invisible or vanishing from and appearing in another place, I'm turning the fucking show off.
And these are going to be reviews. We'll do some watch-alongs for some stuff on Patreon eventually, but not.
Yes, we're gonna. That's one of the things we're doing for April coming up, which it's almost there. Is we're gonna do some watch-alongs for Patreon, but we will review this fine programming, whatever the people want to see for the experience coming up. Because I'll tell you one thing here real quick. People are going to find out it's a fallacy, and a fallacy is not a fake cock. For those of you who are not sure, a fallacy is an untruth. An untruth. It's a fallacy that I like all old 70s and 80s wrestling. There's always been good wrestling and bad wrestling. So we will probably get into more of that as time goes on. It's just there's never been obviously fake, phony wrestling presented on purpose. Never until now. But there's always been good wrestling and bad wrestling. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Well, I'm trying to come up with something that you'll actually enjoy for next week's show. Maybe, I know we talked about it a few weeks ago.
Well, most people don't like it when I enjoy something.
Well, I do. I like when you enjoy something. Why don't we get Mike Mills on to talk to you about some of the stuff he's been watching on his show?
Okay.
Smoky Mountain, NWA 1988. Because I know he has a lot of questions. He asked me, and I always go, well, why don't you ask Jim? This will be a great chance for me
Mike
to get out of the way.
Mike Mills, who does the Booking the Territory podcast, he's been doing a rundown of all the Saturday night TBS shows from those days, all the Smoky Mountain shows, reviewing and talking about them. Okay, you give me something like that I'll enjoy, talking to a sane, rational person like Mike Mills that knows wrestling, and then I could potentially be arm twisted to watch something that I'm probably not really going to like that much, but people are going to like to hear me eviscerate it.
Okay, fair enough.
A little of this and a little of that. We get some of this and some of that. We got this fucking intercourse going on between you and I. This intercourse where we're back and forth with each other. We're intermingling with each other.
It's a fallacy.
Just don't spit on me or slobber on me or anything.
Oh, you got it, Exalted One.
That's the word. Thank you. That's the word for today, folks. Fallacy. And now that I said fallacy, I'm sure fucking Olivier's fucking eyes are brightened up. Oh, there's a fallacy around here somewhere?
Sissy Boy Slap Fight.
Sissy Boy Slap Fight on YouTube. Ladies and gentlemen, Exhibit A, and I go no further. Sissy Boy Slap Fight on YouTube with Mr. Tyson Smith. If that is indeed his real name, unfortunately it is.
It's not a bad name. Why did he? I mean, could he have gone with that, you think, and still have been the Kenny Omega we know and love?
Well, no, because that doesn't sound like some fucking character you'd see on a video game. Tyson Smith. He thinks he's a goddamn... It's like I used to ask Bolin about his fucking no-account, irresponsible, howl at the moon reprobate of a child. I'd say, when is your fucking son, after he finishes being a race car driver and he moves to North Korea so that he can... fucking cavort with dear leader, when's he going to try to be a double knot spy? That's what Kenny Olivier's whole thing is about, trying to be somebody he's not. And he does it quite well, because none of these people should actually exist in the real world. Anyway, close this thing up.
Do his friends call him Ty?
Does he have friends?
I'm sure he does. Well,
if he has, somebody ought to tell him some things. If he's got some real friends. Like, stick those fucking hands in your pockets, twinkle toes. Anyway, close this show up.
This is your show. You usually close this one up.
I forgot. All right. Well, next week, Mike Mills about good wrestling. We're going to review some kind of wrestling. We'll still all be in fucking confinement unless Trump gets his way, and then we'll be packing the churches so we can kill all our elderly people. And until then, thank you. Fuck you. Bye-bye, everybody.